microphone.
Councillors, ladies and gentlemen, please be upstanding for the Mayor of the City of Clarence, Councillor Brendan Blomley.
Well, hello and welcome all. Before proceeding, I pay my respects to the Murrumbidgee people as the traditional and original custodians of the lands on which we meet, and I acknowledge the continuing connection of the Tasmanian Aboriginal people to the skies, land and waterways. I pay respect to elders past and present. Before we commence with tonight's council meeting, please let us all pause for a quiet moment of reflection and respect. Thank you, councillors. Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. Colleagues, last week, Bob Braslin sadly passed away whilst at work. Bob was a contractor to council and had spent in excess of 20 years working alongside our road construction crews. I would like to acknowledge Bob's contribution to our city and to pass on our condolences to Bob's family. Councillor Warren has kindly agreed to represent council at Bob's funeral, and I thank her for that. I would like us all to now please stand and have a moment of silence in memory of Bob. Colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. Good evening and welcome to the Clarence City Council meeting of Monday, the 27th of May 2024. This meeting is being broadcast live on YouTube, and what is said in this meeting is not protected by privilege, and there is a link to the agenda papers on Council's website. Item 2, apologies. We have a leave of absence from Councillor Heather Chong, otherwise we have a full house. Item number 3, declarations of interest of councillors or close associates. Are there any declarations from councillors? They're being done. We now head into our Omnibus Items, and the first one being 4.1, confirmation of the minutes. The minutes of the council meeting held on the 6th of May 2024 have been circulated. Are there any issues arising? Great. Moving on now to 4.2, Mayor's Communications, and I table my diary entries from the 7th of May through to the 27th of May, and also thank the Deputy Mayor, Councillor Ritchie, for representing me as well. Moving now to 4.2.2, which is a National Awards for Planning Excellence. It's a pleasure to report, colleagues, that at the 2024 National Awards for Planning Excellence held last Wednesday in Melbourne, which is a celebration of the projects, the people and teams who shape our cities, towns and communities into vibrant, sustainable and equitable spaces and places, the Clarence City Council won the National Award for Stakeholder Engagement for the 7 Mile Beach Local Area Plan and received a commendation for planning with country for the Takara Limina project. So on behalf of Council, I'd like to congratulate Mr Maher, Ms Wicks and Ms Coburn and their respective teams on these very well-deserved accolades. Thank you very much. Moving now on to more Mayor's Communications. The first one I have is a letter from football club presidents. Early today, along with other colleagues, I received a joint letter from the presidents of the Lauderdale Football Club and Clarence Football Clubs regarding the AFLW High Performance Centre in our city. And for the benefit of the meeting, I'll now take a few moments to read this correspondence on behalf of the many thousands of members, volunteers and supporters who live in our city. And it reads, on behalf of the 2 premier Australian football clubs in Clarence City, we write to express our strong support for the AFL and AFLW High Performance Centre to be located in our great city. To illustrate our reach, both of our clubs have hosted a home game this season where approximately 3,000 spectators attended. Initial membership numbers provided from the Tasmanian AFL team confirm that 16,000 paid-up members reside in Clarence City. It is estimated that this figure is now closer to 17,000, which I'm sure you'd agree shows extraordinary interest that are having our own AFL team in this city. To have roughly 25% of its entire population signed up as members of a team, we believe, is unrivalled in any city in the entire country. The Clarence and Lauderdale football clubs are also 2 of the largest football clubs in the state, based on the number of players. This excitement of having our own Tasmanian team has flown through to our 2024 entry-level AUSCIC numbers, with over 200 young children signed up, which is a significant increase over previous years. The two AUSCIC centres run by Clarence and Lauderdale are the two largest in the state in 2024. This growth is expected to increase further the closer we get to our Tasmanian team playing its first game. The excitement that the boys and girls of our city will receive from having their heroes not only training here, but getting to use the exact same facilities will be enormous and provide positive whole-life experiences for our youth. In talking to our members, we've found that there is overwhelming support for the High Performance Centre to be located at the old Rezoning Golf Course site. Indeed, there was great excitement when it was announced that Clarence was the location hosted or selected to host the centre. However, in recent times, we've experienced the dismay from many who are frustrated that a noisy minority may deny our children and city these tremendous assets which were built at no cost to council or ratepayers. In closing, both of us raised our children in Clarence, and our children in turn are raising their children here. We strongly believe that this is by far the best municipality in Tasmania to live and raise a family. Clarence is expected to grow significantly in the coming decades, and for it to remain the best place to live, it is imperative we have world-class recreational facilities. Thank you for considering the viewpoint of our clubs in this important matter, and that's jointly signed by Andrew Lydon, the President of the Lauderdale Football and Sports Club, and Mr Scott Wade, the President of the Clarence Football Club. I now move on to further, and I'll table that as well, thank you, CEO. Now move on to further Mayor's communications, which is the Roads to Recovery correspondence. Colleagues, on the 22nd of May, the Australian Government wrote to me regarding the Roads to Recovery program in our city, and I'll provide an overview of that correspondence. The Australian Government is proud of its continued support for road construction and maintenance through Roads to Recovery, with $4.4 billion being made available over the next 5 years. I am pleased to advise that Clarence City Council will receive $5,719,467 for the 5-year funding period 1 July 2024 through to the 30th of June 2029. In addition to the Roads to Recovery funding commitment, the Australian Government has increased funding to the Blackstop program, and from 1 July 2024 will commence the new Safer Local Roads and Infrastructure program. Collectively, these programs provide a valuable source of funding to local government seeking to improve road infrastructure and safety. And that's signed by the Honourable Catherine King MP, Minister for Infrastructure, Transport, Regional Development and Local Government, as well as the Honourable Christy McBain MP, Minister for Regional Development, Local Government and Territories. I also table that one. Thank you very much. Now move on to 4.3, Council Workshops, as listed in the agenda. 4.4, CEO, are there any petitions?
Thank you, Mayor. I understand that Councillor James has a petition which was tabled at the last meeting but had some deficiencies, which I understand are now addressed.
Councillor James.
Yeah, look, thank you, Mr Chairman. The petition is worded to the Mayor and councillors of the City of Clarence to hereby request Council undertake urgent draining works to prevent further flooding of the properties on the southern side of Evandale Street, South Arm. That's signed by 48 petitioners, and this matter has been on the boil for a number of, years, and hopefully, given that a petition is now being tabled at this place, that there may be a positive report that may come back to address urgent drainage works in Evandale Street, South Arm.
Thank you,
I
Councillor
hereby
James.
table the petition.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Are there any other petitions from colleagues? Being no, we move now on to 4.5, reports from outside bodies. Councillor Walker, anything for Copping Refuse Disposal Site Joint Authority?
We met last week and a quarterly report, etc., to follow soon.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Councillor Warren, anything to report on the Tas Waste South?
No, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Warren. And there's nothing for me to report on either the Tas Water Corporation or the Greater Hobart Committee. Colleagues, are there any other reports from Council and special committees and other representative bodies to be tabled this evening? There being none, we move now on to 4.6, our weekly briefing reports. The weekly briefing reports of the 6th, 13th and 20th of May 2024 have been circulated to councillors. Are there any matters arising? Councillor James.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. The weekly briefing report of the 20th of May 2024, parking sensor project, Kangaroo Bay, Rosny Park and Belrive. In that memorandum from the Head of Infrastructure and Natural Assets, it refers to second paragraph. After sensors were installed, Vodafone advised the contractor that they were no longer supporting the NB-IoT network in Tasmania. As the sensors have Vodafone SIMs in them, this posed a significant issue, sensors not functioning, which could cause project delays, unquote. My question is, through you, to the appropriate officer. There seems to be an initial cost that the ratepayers of Clarence had to outlay through this body for the installation of the sensors amounting to, 1,000 parking sensors across Kangaroo Bay, Rosny Park and Bell Reef. Is the Head of Infrastructure and Natural Assets been able to provide us with the cost that Council approved in its budget for those installation of 1,000 parking sensors across those areas of Kangaroo Bay, Rosny Park and Bell Reef?
Councillor James, thank you for your question. Before I call on Mr Graham, I will just draw your attention to the rest of that memo, where it clearly outlines that Council and the contractor have now approved a variation to the contract to resolve that matter. The variation summary is outlined below. As interim solution, the contractor is to install access points or relays to allow for the solution to operate without the Vodafone network at no cost to Council. As a longer-term solution, the contractor has agreed to replace the Vodafone sensors with new sensors and remove the access points and relays by December 2025 at no cost to Council. It is likely that these new sensors will operate on the Telstra network. However, due to the nature of them being a multi-SIM sensor, they could switch to an alternative network if required. The new practical completion date for this project is likely to be late August 2024. This date will be confirmed in the coming weeks when the interim solution installation schedule is finalised.
Yes, I'm well aware of that. My question was in relation to the initial cost that the Council had to expend in order to actually install those 1,000 sensors. I know that the relays have been approved and a variation to the contract. That's for the relays. But my question is in relation to the original cost of those 1,000 sensors, which did go through our budget, and that's the reason for my question. Could I please be advised of the initial cost, please?
Sure, and you're quite right, something that we all agreed as part of the budget process, Councillor James. CEO and Ms Murrell, are you in a position, or Mr Graham?
Through Mr Mayor, I think it's highly likely this was approved in a closed council meeting, so in terms of the tender. So I can advise council through a briefing report on the actual cost, but no monies have been outlaid on this contract until practical completion is achieved.
Okay, Councillor James. Thank you, Councillor James. Any other issues arising from the weekly briefing reports? Right, there being none, I note that we're at the end of our omnibus items. Can I have a mover, please? Thank you, Councillor Kennedy. Seconded, Councillor Goyne. All those in favour? Right, that's unanimous. Sorry, Councillor Walker abstained.
No, you didn't say it didn't.
All right, what are you doing, Councillor Walker?
You said all those in favour, hands were raised, it was declared unanimous.
All right, let's try it again, Councillor Walker. All those in favour? All those against? Okay, so Councillor Walker's against accepting the omnibus items. All right, item number 5 now is public question time. Public questions on notice 5.1. There are 3 questions listed, 2 from Mrs Joanne Marsh and 1 from Mr Victor Marsh. CEO, please.
Thank you, Mayor. As you indicated, I have 3 questions. I'll read out the question first and then provide the answer. So Mrs Marsh's first question is, how would council leaders describe their understanding of the concept of a social licence to operate and how it relates to the current matter of the location of the HPTC in Rosny's Parks in the City of Clarence? The answer to that question is, I'm not placed to answer on behalf of council leaders, by which we assume you mean councillors. This question is best directed to councillors individually. What I will say to clarify, in regard to your comment on the social licence to operate the High Performance Centre, regardless of where it may be situated within the city, Council's only role at this point relates to the location as a landowner. Council will not have any role in the operational side of the High Performance Centre. The second question is as follows. When will Council consider designing a flowchart to show graphically the steps Council take in the consultation process about a development proposal from the germ of an idea to the commencement of works to help explain this aspect of the community consultation policy? The answer to that question is Council staff have processes and systems in place to ensure consistency and continuity when engaging with the community, and while these systems and processes help inform the broad base of our consultations, Council specialist staff will tailor consultations depending on the many factors such as audience and topic to ensure that they achieve success. It is also important to note that the statutory requirements for consultation only apply after a development application is lodged. Aside from council projects, Council can only request that a developer undertake additional consultation prior to lodgement or after. Ultimately, the amount of non-statutory consultation undertaken is not within Council's absolute control, other than when Council is the proponent. The third question tonight comes from Mr Marsh, and his question is as follows. My wife and I have been questioning the Clarence City Council for over 15 years about consultation processes in various developments leading up to the Rezoning Parks HPTC proposal. My question is, when is the Clarence City Council going to start consulting with the community in the initial stages of a development proposal before any plans are drawn up? And in answer to that, I refer to my previous answer to Mrs Marsh.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions without notice from the gallery this evening? Mr Fick, thank you.
Through you, Mr Mayor, to the General Manager or Mr Ross Graham. Last meeting I asked a question on how long it takes to answer a question from the public when it's formally registered as a question from the public to the Council. And I was informed that they'll try to respond within 10 days. That must have spiked a bit of energy because I got an answer from a question that I raised in January, just in the last week. The question that I was talking about was raised 3 months ago and I still haven't got an answer to that. Can either one of those please tell me the answer when I'm going to get a successful answer to the question I've raised?
CEO, thank you.
Thank you, Mr Figg. I think you'll need to be a bit more specific and tell us which question you were referring to so that I know precisely what I'm looking for.
Okay, certainly do that. I asked the question. I've had a number of responses that told me to go to sites on the internet to find out. The question related to what heights do council have to rely upon for the land in Lauderdale? And I specifically showed an area which you in the past have called the basin. And I've asked for the latest surveyed heights that you have on record and rely on.
Mr Fick, thank you. We'll take that one on notice. And the CEO, now that he's got that detail, will come back to you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in the public gallery wish to ask a question this evening? Okay. There being no more, we now move on to item number 6, which is deputations by members of the public. Members of the public making a deputation are reminded that they are limited to 3 minutes and a timer will sound at the end of that time. And in the interest of fairness, I will strictly enforce that rule. And I understand there are 4 deputies this evening. CEO, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. First deputation tonight is from Mr Rod Flynn in relation to the High Performance Centre.
Thank you, Mr Flynn. If you can start, please, with your name and suburb, please.
My name is Rodney Flynn and my suburb is Rosny Hill, actually. Thank you, Mayor and councillors, for allowing me to make this deputation. When my wife and I purchased in Bastick Street 5 years ago, I never would have imagined that I would have to make a deputation to save the public park directly across the road from our residents from being turned into a training facility for elite athletes. This is not about the benefits or otherwise of an AFL team, a stadium or associated infrastructure such as the proposed High Performance Centre. This deputation is about highlighting the lack of any consultation with the directly affected residents of Bastick Street about such a major change to the amenity of our street. We only found out about this proposal when we received a letterbox drop from the local dog walking association about a rally they were holding in Charles Hand Park in early February. We subsequently emailed councillors and sent a formal letter to council requesting more detail about the issues that would directly affect our street. For example, increased traffic on an already busy road, lighting, noise, and more importantly, to what extent would numerous mature trees have to be removed together with the associated bird life. These trees also provide visual and noise screening from the busy Rezoning Hill Road and Eastland Shopping Centre. On the 14th of February, we received a letter from the Office of the Mayor acknowledging our concerns in relation to the development of the HPC in Rezoning Park. And this letter stated, and I'll read from it, as part of the development of the precinct plan, Council will consult the community to get their feedback as we did in developing the initial proposal. Some 3 months later, as directly affected residents, we have still to receive any direct engagement from Council regarding the precinct plan. We and other residents of Bastick Street would like to know when the consultation will occur. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Flynn. CEO?
Thank you. I can provide some clarity around that.
It wasn't a question, that was deputation.
Oh, sorry. Off on a different frolic. Our next deputation is from Ms Beth Rees in relation to the High Performance Centre.
Thank you, Ms Rees.
Yes.
Sorry?
I'm Beth Rees and I live in Rezoning.
Thank you.
And I want to provide a historical overview. In 2014, the vision for Kangaroo Bay, as expressed by the then Mayor, was for a boutique hotel surrounded by cafes, restaurants and small businesses. The vision for Rezoning Hill Nature Recreation Reserve was to be comparable to Mount Nelson, a viewing platform and a small restaurant or cafe, and the community welcomed these developments. Then, with no consultation and minimal communication, and with the enthusiastic support of the Department of State Growth, the Kangaroo Bay plans had morphed into an ugly, inappropriately large hotel that was to dominate the bay and cut off visual, aesthetic and pedestrian flow between Belrive Waterfront and the Kangaroo Bay Drive. Rezoning Hill was to have an equally large and inappropriate hotel wrapping around 3 sides of the hill. The public was devastated by the lack of consultation and the potential loss of much-loved places. 10 years later, instead of a boulevard bustling with shops and cafes, the Kangaroo site is desolate, fenced off from public recreation and businesses. Rezoning Hill is neglected and forlorn. Known orchid sites have been dug up and dead wildlife has been slung over the bank. The site's often rubbished, frequented by hoons and often requires calls to police. Council has refused requests for a boom gate simply to stop nighttime hooning. In about 2020, the Council initiated the City Heart project and the community heaved a sigh of relief. Perhaps the Council had learned the lessons of arrogant lack of communication. The community embraced the project with enthusiasm. It was a rich demonstration of the willingness and the creativity of a community to work together when they felt that they were valued and appreciated. The focus groups quickly established that Charles Hand Park and then Rezoning Public Golf Club should be retained and further developed as public space allowing for passive recreation and some active sports. Development should be focused on uniting the Rezoning Eastlands and Belrive centres and addressing the issue of flow between the business centres. Here we are in 2024, and it feels like so much déjà vu. The Mayor, the CEO, and again the Department of State Growth are riding roughshod over the careful work of the City Heart project. They're showing marked lack of respect to the many citizens who've put the time and effort into the project and to the community in general, and we are devastated. I'm appealing to the experienced councillors who've been through all this, and also to the new councillors, because you've signed up for a really difficult job and I appreciate what you're doing for us. But we've already trashed Kangaroo Bay and we've already trashed Rosny Hill and we've lost 10 years of creative development.
Thank you, Ms Rees.
Please don't destroy our park.
So, yeah, next speaker, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Our next speaker tonight is Mr Brian Chapman, also in relation to the High Performance Centre.
Okay, Mr Chapman.
Brian Chapman, Belreed Bluff, on top of the bluff there. I'll scrap the first part. I don't think my expertise needs to be read. I got the opinion after hearing on Devil's Advocate this afternoon that my expertise probably wouldn't even count. So I'll just mention this. It's in front of you if you need to read it. A respected Clarence ex-senior footballer told me, I am as passionate as anyone about having our own AFL team here in Tassie and all the facilities that come with it. However, the proposed location for the High Performance Centre is inappropriate. The old golf grounds are the jewel in the crown of the Clarence municipality and should be preserved for future generations to enjoy. They can provide the focal point for the community to come together for so many activities. Why should we give them up for 50 hairy-chested lads to strut their stuff on, most of whom will have no connection to Clarence? I've given you a attached scale map of 3 possible ovals that fit into the space, but they are dominated from below by what's called intrusive landscape planning. In other words, if you're at the bottom of the mound, or the Big Bang, it's right in your face. It's this in-your-face stuff. This is where cut and fill produces user annoyance caused by feeling overwhelmed, unwelcome or uninvited. So you may as well forget about the City Heart idea, because the City Heart will go underneath those ovals and it's not going to feel very nice at all. So it's intrusive landscape, intrusive overhead lighting, high fences to stop footballers going outside the area. So taking away open space and green belts is not necessarily a livable city, which we claim to have. Have a closer look at Manhattan's Central Park, where the City Heart is green space and not oval, you should see on that map. Mr Mayor, you do not have a mandate to proceed. You say the vast majority of Clarence residents support you, and that's 1.7%. Doesn't equal a mandate. That's 1,000 out of 50,000. I plead with the councillors to stop and reconsider. You have the power to do this. By the way, the bird sanctuary, I heard Mr Mayor this afternoon, the bird sanctuary isn't in Charles Hand Park. It's just on your doorstep, just down there. I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr Chapman. CEO.
Thank you, Mayor. Our final deputation tonight is Ms Annette Emmett in relation to the development application for 8 Opus Drive.
Good evening, Ms Emmett.
Good evening. My name is Annette Emmett and I live in part of the Acton View subdivision at Acton Park. Just a quick overview of the Acton View subdivision. It has 9 properties in it, and in that property there is the Acton View cottage, the original sandstone cottage, and is heritage listed together with its sandstone buildings. The original milking shed on the bush side of the Opus Drive has been renovated and is now an attractive Airbnb. The whole subdivision is surrounded either by part of the Katangara Trail on the left or Acton Road on the right. And it is also the planning committee has a set of criteria on which to base their decisions, and this is about the caravan park that is proposed. I have to agree with most of the decisions except the one based on privacy. The planting of 2 metre high trees will not provide me or 22 Opus Drive on the other side of the proposed caravan park with the privacy of which I now enjoy and I feel that I'm entitled to. No mention has been made of the width or the density of these trees will provide. There are far more concerns that the Planning Committee is unable to address. High camps, the company being used for booking, have two other sites in the Clarence municipality, one on 28 acres in an open area at Sandford, the other at Clifton Beach on 3 acres. It is wholly private from the main house. This is the one at Clifton Beach, and set amongst native trees and has levelled gravel sites. Both of these camps do not impinge on anyone's privacy. 8 Overs Drive has requested 2 sites in less than 2 hectares on basically an open paddock. In a recent photograph showing the position of the owner's caravan on site, the caravan appears to be almost surrounded by mature eucalypts. These trees are on the grounds of 22 Overs Drive and provide no shade whatsoever to the sites. Site 2 shows a shed and large gum tree, which is about 20 metres down into the sheep paddock, neither giving any overhead shade to this site. Granted, there are shrubs which are about 2 metres high, giving no overhead shade. The site is open and sloping away from the house, and it appears the site will not be levelled, unlike the Sandford property. The plan shows a gravel driveway to the beginning of each site, but no mention of it continuing to the actual grass parking sites.
Thank you, Ms Emmett. Thank you.
Could I make just a statement? They have been asked for a totally which I think is most important.
Ms Emmett, I think in the interest of fairness, we will have to call it there, but thank you very much for your deputation.
I'd like also to tender this about the property which has been
thank you, Ms Emmett.
advertised on the first showing that it is a RFB 10 site, whereas it should be could be completely.
Thank you, Ms Emmett. So what we'll ask Ms Ellis to actually circulate that amongst elected members because your matter will be dealt with very shortly today. Thank you. I'll pass it to the Deputy Mayor. And I now advise that Council intends to act as a planning authority under the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act of 1993. Moving on to item 7.1, which is a planning application for 16 Douglas Street, Belrive, additions and alterations, single dwelling. Is there a mover for the recommendation, please? Thank you, Councillor Hume. Is there a seconder? Councillor Hunter, thank you. Councillor Hume.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I understand that there are a number of representations to this application and that there were concerns about impacts and it will have some impacts, but as the officers have observed, the protrusions beyond the building envelope are fairly slight. So if you adjusted it slightly to fit within the building envelope, you would actually have a development that complies with the acceptable solution, which would have a similar impact in terms of overshadowing, which is one of the main concerns. The overshadowing that's regarded as unreasonable is either caused by parts of the building within the building envelope and a substantial portion also caused by the existing dwelling. And there were also concerns raised in terms of bulk and visual impact, but the bulk is separated by a courtyard and the development is of a similar scale to other two-storey developments in the area. Now, I did receive, and councillors received an email in which one representative made the point that a development, when you consider a use standard, the performance criteria should be considered on its own rather than in relation to the acceptable solution. That's something that the tribunal has found in a couple of cases. However, the situation's a bit more complicated than that. And I'll give a bit of history in terms of tribunal decisions to explain why it's a bit more nuanced. So there was the Sama decision in December 2016 basically said that the tribunal accepts the permitted building envelope is an accepted and appropriate measure of the reasonable loss of amenity for this clause. Now, there were two decisions subsequent to that, which were Henry Designs and Boland, which found that the components and requirements of the test of performance criteria are independent of the acceptable solutions. But then along came the Marmick decision in April 2018, where the tribunal said it will not consider acceptable solutions as generally establishing benchmarks against which performance criteria should be measured. That, of course, does not mean the performance criteria should be assessed in a vacuum, and the fact that development may be permitted within the requirements of a zonal code may be relevant to assessments of reasonable and amenity. In this decision, they referenced another decision called Fuchs, which was also referenced by a later 2021 Supreme Court decision that upheld the points put forward in Fuchs that you can actually consider what the impact of an application that would be within the acceptable solution, in particular the building envelope. Just to explain all that, while there have been some tribunal decisions that have said the performance criteria need to be looked at independently, more recent ones plus the Supreme Court have actually said it's reasonable to consider the impact of a development within acceptable solution, in particular a building envelope, and therefore it's relevant to only consider the impact of those small protrusions beyond the building envelope and how much they differ from that of the impacts caused by the part of the building that's within it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hume. Councillor Hunter.
I think Councillor Hume's wrapped it up pretty nicely, so I've got nothing further to add.
Thank you. Any other colleagues wishing to speak on this motion? Councillor James, thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The performance criteria, and in particular on page 16, the proposal entails protrusions outside the prescribed building envelope, and also it refers to page 17 when the performance criteria under 8.4.2p3 refers to the siting and scale of a dwelling must not cause an unreasonable loss of amenity to adjoining properties, having regard to reduction in sunlight to a habitable room other than a bedroom of a dwelling on an adjoining property. So when we flick over to page 18 and we deal with overshadowing the private open space of a dwelling on an adjoining property, it says the supplied shadow diagrams show that on the 21st of June, some of the private open space at the rear of 2/18 Douglas starts to be overshadowed by 1 p.m, and by 3 p.m, roughly half is overshadowed. Similarly, the private open space at the rear of 1/18 Douglas Street starts to be overshadowed by 1 p.m, and by 3 p.m, almost all of the private open space at the rear is overshadowed. In the past, when we've been dealing with the performance criteria, we have been dealing with at least 3 hours of sunlight on the winter solstice as being determined as what is an acceptable level of sunlight to a property in relation to this. So my reading of this is that the overshadowing by 1 p.m, and by 3 p.m, almost all the private open space at the rear at 1/18 is overshadowed, and 2/18 is very similar, although roughly half is overshadowed. So over the years, we've always sort of taken the performance criteria as being at least 3 hours of sunlight, and that is basic to be overshadowed and not to be overshadowed during the course of the winter solstice. So my question through you, Mr Mayor, to the Chief Planner, how is it, Mr Mayor, that we have now moved away from those 3 hours of sunlight as at the winter solstice on the 21st of June, and now have an acceptable level of overshadowing, roughly half after 3 p.m, and in the case of the other dwelling, almost all the private open space at the rear is overshadowed. Is that what has been a benchmark in the performance criteria over the years of 3 hours of sunlight? Has that now been superseded by roughly half being overshadowed and then almost all of the private open space being overshadowed? I would seek clarification.
Thank you, Councillor James. Mr Marr, please.
Through you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor James, for the question. As you pointed out, the test under the performance criteria relates to whether it is reasonable or not, and it's set out on pages 17 and 18, the test for that, and the council officer's position. With regard to what you're saying from a benchmark perspective, the tribunal was consistently considered access to a habitable room as being for a 3-hour period, and to private open space to 50% of the open space for a 3-hour period. And as you pointed out, the shadowing starts to occur at 1 p.m, which is after the 3-hour period.
Thank you, Mr Marr. Councillor James, anything else?
Yes, I'll just continue, and it just seems to me that there is substantial overshadowing to those two properties at 2/18 Douglas Street and 1/18 Douglas Street by the very nature and reading and it's my interpretation, again I'm not a city planner, but it just seems to me that there is a substantial overshadowing which is going to impact on those two properties, and therefore, in my opinion, and it would seem if you're going to use the definition of reasonable, then it would seem to me that it is unreasonable for those properties to be sort of overshadowed most of the time between 1 and 3, and then after 3 to be partly or overshadowed. So I believe it does not meet the acceptable solutions, and the performance criteria falls down in relation to that. I will not be supporting the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor James. Anyone else wishing to speak to this motion? Councillor Warren, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Sunlight's important. We always look to see what the impact is going to be on the neighbour, and I thank my colleagues for talking about that in detail. We all received a letter from one of the representatives yesterday. I only had a chance to read that today. And he raises a number of issues of debate, as to factual errors that he feels appear in the report. So he disputes some of the bases on which the report is made. So I regret that I haven't had a chance to pursue those to see whether those are correct or not. And so I don't feel comfortable in approving this today, so I won't be supporting it, because I think that we really need to make sure that the facts do stack up.
Any other colleagues wishing to speak to this motion? There being none, Councillor Hume, by reply, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, in regards to factual errors, I think that I will trust that the planning officers, because I know they're very professional and do an exceptional job, I will trust that they've assessed this carefully and appropriately. But I will also say, in relation to Councillor James's contribution, that going back to my previous comments about the tribunal decisions in relation to building envelope and protrusions beyond the building envelope, the officers also said that it's relevant to consider what parts of the development caused the overshadowing. Substantially, a lot of the overshadowing to private open space is caused by the existing building or portions of the building within the envelope. But having said that, it's also worth reflecting on the fact that while we can share concerns of people who are affected by developments, when we're sitting as a planning authority, what we may interpret as reasonable or may consider reasonable is not necessarily what the tribunal will consider reasonable should this, a decision one way or the other be taken to the tribunal. The tribunal has what's called a persuasive precedent, which means that it's not a precedent that's set in stone that it has to follow all the time. If it receives new evidence that it can overturn that precedent, then it will. But having said that, it tends to follow the precedent, or it tends to use the same patterns and definitions. And therefore, when we sit as a planning authority, what our planning officers do when they provide advice to us is they look at, well, how would this stand up if it went to the tribunal? What precedents have they set in the decisions they've made previously? And they have provided a definition of reasonable overshadowing or unreasonable overshadowing for us to follow. So even though we may put an argument to them, well, this is what we believe is reasonable, the tribunal generally is more likely to go with the definition they've set previously, which has been upheld by the Supreme Court, I mind you. Thank you.
Yeah, Councillor Hume, I'll put the motion, which is a recommendation, that is that the application be approved, subject to conditions and advice. All those in favour? Those against? So carried. Thank you, colleagues. Moving now on to item 7.2, which is planning application for 8 Opus Drive Acton Park Caravan and Camping Park, 2 on-site spaces, visitor accommodation. Councillor Ritchie, the Deputy Mayor, you're moving your alternate motion. Is there a seconder, please? Councillor Kennedy. Thank you. Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. It's once again one of those situations we find ourselves in relating to our favourite topic, visitor accommodation. Regretfully, I find myself not in a position to be able to move a refusal motion here this evening because I much would have preferred to be in that position. However, I don't feel that we would have had the merit to defend a refusal motion. So what I am seeking to do is to amend the officer recommendation to insert some further conditions in respect of the recommendation before us. Now, we've all noted, of course, this issue has begun to cause concern in the community. HIP camping, one of the platforms that has been promoted around our state in relation to this type of activity. I noticed that there's 140 sites listed around Tasmania already. I think we need to look at playing catch up in respect of what's happening out there on the ground. Essentially using the visitor accommodation provisions of the scheme to wedge the activity into is clearly what's happening. As colleagues are aware, I have foreshadowed that I think Council would do well to workshop this issue. I think Legat would do well to look at considering this issue to make a position on in the future, and potentially ministerial review. But nevertheless, in terms of what I put forward for the motion before you now, seeks to limit the number of vehicles, or in this case a caravan or recreational vehicle, that may be on either of the two sites, and they are large sites. When you look at the sizes of the two sites being proposed, also to clarify what is meant by short or medium term visitor accommodation to be 5 days. That's in keeping with what the proponents have put forward themselves in their own application. Again, highly unregulated. There's not definitive definitions of what these things actually mean. And also I've proposed that there be signage erected in terms of the noise provisions and the sorts of times that would have to be observed by people running things like generators that use the sites. I think they're all very reasonable conditions to add to the proposed permit that's been put forward, and I'm hoping that colleagues will see them as sensible conditions, and when taken in conjunction with understanding what's been put forward by the applicants themselves, they actually are reflective of what appears to be being proposed, but my view is that they need to be strengthened by being put into the permit conditions, and also to hopefully at least provide some improved protections for the amenity of the area, while this matter and all levels of government, I think, need to look at playing catch up on what's happening out there. So I appreciate the consideration of colleagues, and I ask for their support.
Thank you, Councillor Ritchie. Councillor Kennedy, please.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Deputy Mayor, for doing the hard work in this space to date, and on this one, which is something some colleagues will know that I brought to Council some time ago through an elected member's request when I was some concerns were raised with me. I thank our deputy tonight for her contribution, and you know, we can't ignore the fact that there's been 18 representations on this item before us now. So once again, I'm very happy to support this recommendation, which, thank you to our officers, they've done a good job in a difficult situation with this. I think this is a space that we've really got to watch, and I would urge colleagues to support this strengthened recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kennedy. Any other colleagues wishing to contribute? Councillor Mulder, thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I too endorse the amended recommendation, which of course is different to an alternative, but it's an amended recommendation, and I do it on the basis that time and time again we're put in this situation where, as a planning authority, we're required to enforce the planning scheme, and it becomes very, very difficult when it's something the planning scheme hasn't envisaged. We've been this through Airbnb, we've been this through other things, but we really don't have any alternatives. And the fact is that this is a use that is permitted by the planning scheme, even though it may not have been envisaged by the planning scheme, but it is permitted, and therefore there isn't much we can do about it. And I would just like to compliment the Deputy Mayor on working through the issues and trying to put some conditions in there which meet the requirements of what the application was all about. I do not believe that it was ever the intention to establish a huge caravan park in this particular area, and it's quite clear that if such was to happen, it would be a different proposal than the one that is being used now, and it would not be permitted by the scheme. But so I compliment the Deputy Mayor on bringing forward some very, very reasonable things. But in terms of the Planning Commission and the Tribunal, every time some one of these things comes forward, yes, there are precedents, but the Tribunal has made it absolutely clear that it doesn't feel bound by its own precedents, but somehow or other we're supposed to follow them. And all I can say about precedents is that no two circumstances are the same, and when one of these things comes before us, it's our job to find out how this may or may not be different to the previous interpretation, and as such make our case on the basis that precedent X does not apply to these circumstances because of Y. And it's not just blindly following the officer's advice, it's not just blindly following the tribunal precedent. We each need to bring our minds as to what is possible within the planning scheme. And that is what I encourage everyone to do, and it is what Councillor Ritchie has done this evening.
Thank you, Councillor Mulder. Any other colleagues wishing to make a contribution? Councillor Jones.
Thank you, and again, this is an improvement on what the officers had suggested that we consider in this place this evening. The question that still nags me in relation to this, and although Part 4 is a new clause, and it states that signage is erected to ensure the permitted hours for various equipment use as outlined in the Environmental Management Pollution Control Noise Regulations 2016, it's on the whiteboard, are clearly evident to all persons assessing the visitor accommodation sites. Now, that's a new condition that's been entered here. However, I'm just still a little bit uncertain as to how on the officer's report on page 52, it says, and I quote, "It is possible that the use would generate noise associated with visitors to and from the site, from traffic movements, from the use of generators to power campers, and from general social interactions. Such noise, however, not considered dissimilar to the type and nature of noise likely to be generated by activities within the surrounding rural residential area." So it does go on and say, and from land use perspective, this is taken to not cause an unreasonable impact on the residential amenity. So notwithstanding that signage is erected and it draws people's attention to the permitted hours for various equipment use, it doesn't, in my opinion, go that far as to basically share some sort of my concerns that such noise, however, not considered dissimilar to the type and nature of noise likely to be generated by activities within the surrounding rural residential area. So you really have a difficulty here as to whether or not the signage, which has been included in this recommendation for consideration, as to whether or not it's going to address the actual use of generators, even though it's now 2 accommodation sites only, and it's for short and medium-term accommodation. It just seems to me, though, that there is this proposal that what noise activity that will be generated will in fact be basically what is happening in the surrounding rural residential area, which I don't think that's the case. I don't think there are generators or noise equivalent to what we would associate with a caravan and camping park being almost identical or happening in the immediate vicinity of a rural residential area. If we had have had a little bit more teeth in that Part 4 to address that, then I would have supported this, and I did talk to the Deputy Mayor and I did indicate my concern at the briefing on Friday as far as that particular reference in the officer's comments on page 52. But I still think that Part 4 of the the recommendation that's before us at this point in time does not go far enough in order to address what is happening here and is also occurring in the immediate rural residential area.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor Warren, thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. 18 representations is a lot, and this is not without precedent. This site was operating without a permit earlier in the year. So I'm guessing that these 18 representatives know exactly what the effect of this site is going to be and the impact that the noise is going to have. It's very concerning reading the officer's report that when most of the representations raise noise as an issue, the officers quite rightly say, you know, we have no jurisdiction over that. It would have to be the Environmental Protection Authority. So you can imagine the situation where, you know, there's a party going on next door at 1 a.m. in the morning, call the EPA, you know, but this is going to happen every 5 days because nobody's staying longer than 5 days. So you're going to have different groups and the same issues. So the sign may go a little way to at least making sure that people are aware of their responsibilities, but if issues do occur, redressing those and getting any sort of comfort for the neighbours is going to be difficult. and I don't think there are any provisions that allow us to take this away once it's granted, although continued complaints to the EPA might result in some sort of penalties. But yes, I do have those concerns. I do thank colleagues for coming up with a slightly tighter recommendation because, again, as has been pointed out, if it complies with the scheme, we can't reject it. But I do feel for those 18 neighbours who know exactly what this is going to mean and the impact that it's going to have on their amenity.
Any other colleagues wishing to make a contribution? Councillor Hume, thank you.
I'd just like to quickly make the point that while nobody should be operating a use that requires a permit without a permit, but when they do and they put in a retrospective application, it at least gives us the opportunity to put some greater controls over it than what was happening previously. Of course, if an application gets rejected, then the controls are even greater again because the use doesn't happen. But look, I'm satisfied that this complies with the provisions of the planning scheme. I mean, in terms of generators, anyone could fire up a generator on a normal residential property as long as it's between the permitted hours, the same way as you can with a lawnmower. There is going to be there are going to be trees planted. I'm sure there'll be work done between the officers and or between our staff and the proponent of this to make sure that they are an appropriate species, that they provide a sufficient buffer visually and in terms of absorbing noise. And I also do congratulate the Deputy Mayor on making sure there are some further restrictions in there to prevent I suppose very, very large gatherings on these sites. So I believe the nearest residence is actually something like, it was just a rough estimate looking at the maps, but probably about 50 to 60 metres from the campsites. I guess it's not ideal for the nearby residents, but we do have to look carefully at the scheme and whether it complies with the provisions of the scheme. And in relation to noise, I believe it does. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hume. Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. For my illumination, general point 2, the permit is for 2 accommodation sites only. Each accommodation site must be limited to a maximum of 1 caravan stroke RV and or 3 tents for any 1 guest booking. So just for clarification, on a site the limit is 1 vehicle and 3 tents, times 2 is 2 vehicles and 6 tents. Now, there's a variety of sizes of caravans, as we know, but boy howdy, is there a variety of sizes of tents as well. Can I get, I can't see it here, and I think this might be one of the deficiencies in the whole thing, so I guess my question, probably through you to the head of planning, is per each site, what is the maximum number of guests that could potentially be there? Is there a ceiling, or is it just as many as you can stack into that many tents and RVs?
Mr Murray, in a position to provide an answer.
Through you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Walker, for the question. The simple answer is no, there's no ceiling, but I refer you that it's the Deputy Mayor's amendment, and so perhaps she may be able to provide more detail.
Yeah, so the Deputy Mayor will provide that in her summation. Won't reply.
Thank you, and I look forward to hearing that because that may provide me with some comfort which I currently do not have. Yes, we hear about tribunal rulings and how they in some ways set precedents, in some ways are still persuadable. I wait to hear what the response is because if I'm not furnished with a degree of comfort, I'm not sure that I can support this because I again, without that information with me to hand now, I'm potentially seeing 2 raves, and boy howdy did I stay at some crowded youth hostels, etc., and campsites in my time. So that's something that I'll be interested in. That's not trying to throw shade on this motion, that's just me trying to highlight my concern. I understand that you've tried to put as much firmament and comfort into this as you can, and I appreciate that, but I still am left with a grave level of concerns.
Any other colleagues wishing to make a contribution this evening? There being none, Deputy Mayor, I'm sorry, sir, there's nothing from the public gallery. I'm sorry. Seeing it's a planning authority now. Deputy Mayor, you're right to reply, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and I thank my colleagues for their contributions, and I also appreciate the representations that have been made on this and from the gallery this evening. And first of all, I'll address the comments in relation to noise. Essentially, the provision that I put in did not go as far as Councillor James might have wanted it to, simply because it couldn't, and because it's already regulated under the Environmental Pollution and Control Act and the regulations that sit underneath that. Now, those regulations and the general approach to residential noise management in Tasmania is that a person's use of noise-making equipment, as well as their recreational activities, must not unreasonably interfere with their neighbours' well-being. This includes their neighbours' ability to use both indoor and outdoor spaces on their property. Now, that's their general tenet. Now, what flows from that is that that regulatory framework, which Council and Tasmania Police are responsible for enforcing level 1 complaints, and then level 2 go to the EPA. So it would be a matter of testing. So this is one of these things that will have to be tested in time. So I'd expect if this ends up being abused and equipment isn't either being used within the designated and approved times, or indeed it becomes unacceptable, that it would have to be tested. That's the only way that this would be able to be looked at in the future. There's no way for us to second guess these sorts of things now. It needs to be tested by the authority at the time of a complaint. And so, you know, we'll just have to wait and see what happens with that aspect of it. In respect to Councillor Walker's question, that's a good one, and wasn't one that wasn't thought through. In discussions with council planning staff on that very question, it became quite vexed because you talked about camps, tents being different sizes. Motorhomes can be different sizes. Some can sleep 3, some can sleep 5. Getting into trying to say, you know, how many people could attend became a very difficult and vexed questions in terms of how you would look to police that. It was thought better and more practical by limiting a vehicle and the number of tents. Now, obviously this is a bit of a moving feast in my view in terms of what we continue to look at in terms of how these are regulated. There are so many things undefined in the way that this sort of activity is happening, and that was what I said at the outset of my contribution, that much like some of the other aspects of the visitor accommodation provisions under the scheme, there are lots of problems, there are lots of things undefined. Will these attract, you know, commercial rates for council? Will these attract the levy that the state government's put on visitor accommodation? So that's the explanation.
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'll put the amended recommendation, that is the planning application for caravan and camping park, 2 on-site spaces, visitor accommodation, 8 Opus Drive, Acton, be approved subject to conditions and advice. All those in favour? Against? So carried. Thank you. Moving now on to item 7.3, which is a planning application for 9, 11 and 13 Commerce Drive, Howrah, service station, associated conveniences store, vehicle fuel sales and service, 2 drive-through takeaway restaurants, 24-hour operation, food services, consolidation of 3 lots into 1 lot. I understand that Councillor Mulder has circulated an alternative recommendation. Councillor Mulder, do you have a seconder? Councillor Hume? Thank you. Councillor Mulder, the floor is yours.
Yes, Mr Mayor, and I have not circulated an alternative recommendation. I've circulated an amended recommendation. Because
the one I've got here is alternative.
I know, but it's not what I submitted. But anyway,
okay.
It's actually...
Sorry. Can we just stop the clock, please? Just to be sure, is this your motion, Councillor Mulder?
That is the motion,
okay, thank
but
you.
it is technically an amended motion.
Thank you, Councillor Mulder. Please restart the clock. Thank you.
Mr Mayor, this is the next stage of Glebe Hill, and I don't think too many of us have too many difficulties with extending what has become a very successful shopping complex at Glebe Hill, although it had some very terrible impacts on some of the local smaller businesses in the area. But I'm sorry, that's the nature of the beast. At this stage, we've got plenty of cafes, we've got a bottle shop, we've got fast foods, and we're about to add a couple more, and now also a servo. Now, in a personal opinion, I think the burgers are better at Hungry Jack's, but I'm not so sure about the pressure-cooked chooks. So, my real question is in the future, where is the gym with which we're going to pay the penance for all this fast food and for the gym? But on a serious matter, the application was for 24 by 7 with some reduced hours on Sundays and public holidays. That was the actual words of the application, which is why the recommendation is what it is. But the fact is that was an error on the part of the applicant. There are two ways in which this could be addressed. One is that we could pass the motion as per the officers, which would mean that the applicant would then have to come back and submit another application with attenuated fees and all the rest of it to give effect to what basically the community understood in the first place, because the ideas of those reduced hours on Sundays and public holidays wasn't part of the advertised thing. So the simplest way of all is to amend the application to give what the applicant actually originally intended was 24 by 7 and reduce the bureaucracy and the fees associated therewith. And apart from that, apart from my concerns about how this traffic is managed, about how you drive into Glebe Hill and then you go around a roundabout and then you've got to go back into suburbia and then you've got to go back out to the pass road, when in fact, originally, and we are powerless to fix this, there should have been a slip road off the South Arm Highway which reconnected with the South Arm Highway, and the entire development should have been to the other side of that so traffic could flow through without going it. But that horse has escaped. And there's no getting it back in the corral. I'll just make that point because I really think sometimes with these traffic things, and once again, this is a planning scheme thing, we've got to deal with the application that's put to us. We can't come back and say, no, that's not where the road should go. No, that's not where the public place should be. We are locked into the idea that we have to, within Australia's shortest time frame, make a decision within 6 weeks. And there's no communication and there's no consultation and there's no thing. But it is what it is, and all I'm saying is that this is a slight amendment to make up for a mistake in the application, and I don't believe we should punish the developer in this particular instance with excessive fees by having to correct that error.
Thank you, Councillor Mulder. Councillor Hume.
Thank you, Mayor, and I thank Councillor Mulder for his amended motion. I certainly agree with his comments about, it would be good to have for that whole commercial precinct, and particularly when you're pulling into a service station fast food complex, to be able to come straight back onto the highway again. And like he said, that horse has bolted, unfortunately. We are dealing with the application before us. But I just wanted to mention that a number of conditions have been put into the application to address the key concerns. There was a traffic impact assessment undertaken by a qualified traffic engineer which addressed the issues of pedestrian safety, traffic impact, and also whether the drive-through queuing and parking is sufficient. There are filtration systems and extraction fans fitted to take care of the food odours. There were representations raised about the behaviour of patrons, but that's not actually something that's a relevant consideration under the scheme. The noise assessment has been conducted and it complies with the relevant standards. Detailed design work has been done to avoid light glare and spill, and there are also concerns raised about the impact of fast food on health and wellbeing. However, this is a permitted use and the health of the community isn't actually a consideration under the scheme. Maybe, as Councillor Moulder suggested, it would be good to have a gym in the area. Although there is a ZAP nearby at, or a couple nearby. So if you want to go up the road a couple of kilometres, maybe to Rosny or Shoreline. So anyway, yes, it's an expanding commercial hub, and you know, as the population grows, we will have more commerce in that area, and you know, this is the kind of development I guess we can expect there, particularly coming off an arterial road, which you know we Tasmanians generously refer to as a highway. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hume. Deputy Mayor, thank you.
Yes, Mr Mayor. I would like to also thank Councillor Moulder for bringing forward the amended recommendations, common sense recommendation. I think just one point I wanted to make and to highlight, and if it's already been touched upon, my apologies, but it's really important to note that in fact what we are looking at here in this amended recommendation was in fact what was advertised and what the community were able to provide feedback on. So we're not actually addressing something that wasn't what was put out there whole. It's simply an error. So there's nothing new that we are looking to approve here that the community hasn't seen or wasn't advertised. So that's, for me, the really critical part. I have no other issue with what's being proposed here, and I think it's a really important point to make that the community has seen it as it would be considered now. So I support the amended recommendation.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Any other colleagues wishing to make a contribution? There being none, Councillor Moulder, your right of reply, please.
Yes, Mr Mayor, I just commend the motion to my colleagues.
Thank you. Well, that being the case, I put the amended recommendation standing in the name of Councillor Moulder, and that is that this amended recommendation be approved subject to conditions and advice. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much, colleagues. I now advise that Council now concludes its deliberations as a planning authority under the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act 1993. Moving on to item number 8. There is nothing under 8.1, 8.2 or 8.3. Moving on to 8.4 being governance. 8.4.1, the quarterly report to the 31st of March 2024. I'll call for a mover, please. Thank you, Councillor Hunter. And a seconder, Councillor Kennedy. Thank you. Councillor Hunter.
Yes, I'd like to thank the officers for putting together yet another comprehensive quarterly report. It's wonderful to read the report, and there's nothing necessarily new that we haven't seen as councillors through the workshops and all the wealth of information we're provided throughout the course of the quarter. So that I take great comfort in that and greatly appreciate it. So I seek colleagues' support.
Thank you, Councillor Hunter. Councillor Kennedy.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to make a contribution? There being none, I'll put... Oh, Councillor Hunter. All right. All those in favour to accept the recommendation, which is to accept the quarterly report of 31 March 2024, put the motion. That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Moving now on to 8.4.2, which is the General Grants Program. I'll call for a recommendation, a move of the recommendation, please. I think the Deputy Mayor beat you then, Councillor Hume. I'll make you the seconder. How's that sound? All right. So the Deputy Mayor is moving the recommendation. Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I shall be very brief. It's always pleasant to be moving recommendations around grant streams. There's some fantastic proposed grant recipients. It's all detailed in the report. I thank all of our council officers who have gone through what I'm sure is always a very difficult task of sorting out those people who will be successful and those people who may not have been, and perhaps for next time. So I'm very pleased to be able to move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Hume.
Thank you, Mayor. I, in my previous term on council, served on the Partnership Grants Assessment Panel, so I can attest to what a torturous process it is. So As the Deputy Mayor said, and I'll echo those comments, congratulations to everyone on the assessment panel for this hard work. And in fact, they had a much more difficult job. When I was on that panel, we were looking at selecting a handful of grants out of what was usually a small handful of applications, maybe 3 grants out of 5 applications. So I can't imagine, and that was a difficult process just for those few. So I can't imagine what they've been through. But having said that, you have to have winners and losers. If the amount of money that's applied for isn't equal to the amount of money that's budgeted. But what I would say to the losers is, please don't be disheartened. Keep working on your projects. Keep putting in submissions. You may get lucky down the track. You can always get feedback and rework your submissions. And also in relation to a couple that missed out, I noticed that there were comments in the report about that some unsuccessful projects may actually still be able to be progressed through other council programs. So that's very positive to see as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Kim. Anyone else wishing to make a contribution here? Deputy Mayor, right of reply?
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
I'll put the motion, which is recommendation. That is, the council approves the distribution of financial grants totalling $97,992.86 to community groups and organisations as detailed in the associated reports and its attachments. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Moving now on to item 8.4.3, which is a High Performance Centre Public Meeting Summary Report. There's a recommendation. Call for a mover. Councillor Warren, thank you. Is there a seconder? Councillor Hunter, thank you. Councillor Warren, you're moving the recommendation? Thank you. The recommendation is the council notes the summary of submissions and motions passed arising from the AFL High Performance Centre public meeting held on the 15th of May 2024 and meeting notes attached to the associated report for inclusion on council's website. Councillor Warren.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. There will be a number of people here tonight and watching online who are disappointed at the substance of this motion because it essentially notes what happened at the public meeting. I know a lot of people would have liked to have seen these motions put before council and voted on tonight. That's not happening. It could have happened, but we would have had to put it in 10 days ago. It doesn't mean that it might not happen at a future meeting. So tonight is all about recognising the conversation so far, and that is by no means finished. So it doesn't preclude us actually talking about the motions that were passed. So I thought I'd do that tonight. So the first motion that was passed at the public meeting, the very well attended public meeting, was that the level of consultation undertaken by Clarence Council with residents does not constitute comprehensive community consultation and was insufficient for such a significant issue. Now, a lot of people would agree with that, and we've heard tonight that the 7 Mile Beach consultation won a national award. I suggest that perhaps the consultation process for this might not have been in that same category. In fact, I'm sure there was a lot of room for improvement. However, since the very brief and very limited survey that went out, we've had such an outpouring of information from our residents. Tonight we heard from residents in Bastick Street. We heard from other residents in Bastick Street at the public meeting. We had a petition from over 1,000 people saying that they were unhappy with the decision and the lack of consultation. So I think we can say, yes, that first one does definitely stand up. The consultation did not meet community expectations for a project and a significant project of this size. What it does mean is that we now have numbers well in excess of 1,000 of Clarence residents who do not support the High Performance Centre at the Rosny Parklands and Charles Hand Park. So I think that it would be disingenuous to keep quoting the results of the survey as the definitive numbers. We now know that there are significantly more residents who have been prepared to contact us and say that they don't want the High Performance Centre in that location. And that leads us to the second point. The second motion that was moved was that this meeting opposes the use of Charles Hand Park, Memorial Park and Rezoning Parklands for an AFL High Performance Training Centre as approved in principle by Clarence City Council. And I think that is certainly the message that has come through loud and clear from those well over 1,000 people, including around 400 who attended the public meeting. And most of them were really clear. It's not that they don't support a high performance centre, they do not support it in that location. I'm sorry, Mr Mayor, can I have no side conversations while I'm talking, please? Point of order. I believe that's in the Code of Conduct.
The Deputy Mayor is seeking some advice, Councillor Warren.
Can we stop the clock while she does that, perhaps?
Thank you, Ms Ellis. Be able to stop the clock. Thank you.
It's just that I do find it very
Councillor
distracting.
Warren, get to the Warrens. The clock's been stopped. All right. Councillor Warren, thank you. Just restart the clock, please, Ms Ellis.
Thank you for that. I think I was up to number 3, which was to start a motion to start a new consultation. I think there are a number of ways we can do that. I think that if we have an alternative location, then we should look at starting a consultation. Number 4 was a really strong vote of confidence in continuing to develop our parklands according to the City Heart project. And we've heard tonight from one of our deputies how highly regarded that consultation process was. Number 5 was a motion to stop work so that until it is confirmed by Parliament that an AFL stadium will exist in Hobart, no site works in preparation for the High Performance Training Centre is to commence at any selected location in Clarence. Wouldn't it be a tragedy if we did all that bulldozing and blasting in Charles Hand Park with the cut and fill that's required to put 2 flat ovals on a slope, possibly on a dolerite slope on Charles Hand Park? Wouldn't it be a tragedy if we started doing that and then, for whatever reason, the AFL stadium fell through? So that might be a motion that a councillor might like to move at a future meeting. And 6, the council rescinds its vote of 11th of December. That again is something that would be a matter for a future council meeting. Hopefully, if we have an alternate location, that can be done. So,
thank you, Councillor Warren. Councillor Hunter, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Isn't it fascinating how when you actually do proper community engagement, such as City Heart Plan, which is so highly regarded, we've just won a national award for 7 Mile Beach. You set an extremely high standard and a bar, not only as an organisation, but for a community and what they expect. And this meeting was an obvious sign that we've set a really high standard. And in my view, because we were under such pressure, we failed to meet that standard in this instance. I think everyone who attended that meeting, in my view, that is the type of meeting we should be having and inviting everyone from the public prior to making such large decisions for our community. I thank Councillor Warren for her contribution, and I thought about this a lot in preparation for this meeting, and I would be willing to support a number of those motions if they were brought forward tonight or in the future. However, now is probably not the appropriate time to do that. It's also important to note, one thing I've realised being in this role is lots of things are moving feasts. This is definitely one. So much has happened, and rumours I've heard, even just since the public meeting. We might not even be looking at a site in this municipality in the near future, and we're making a fuss out of something that is sort of out of our control. So tonight we're here to note the report, which I'm happy to do, and interested to continue to watch this moving feast, but we'll also be happy to support any motions that are put forward by this council based on what came out of the public meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Hunter. Any other speakers? Councillor James, thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. And, may I say from the outset that I would have thought that the recommendation would have had some sort of key elements to at least send the message to the community that those submissions and motions have been taken on board, and that following the meeting that council believes that public consultation on a significant issue such as this would be noted in the recommendation that's before us. Something along those lines, and to thank, thank those people that turned up to the meeting, thank the 4 members of the panel who absolutely sort of went through a lot of rigour in response to the concerns that a lot of the people had, and quite rightfully so, had at that time. So the motion really isn't a reflection on the meeting on that night. And by noting and not giving a little bit of credit to the people who actually spoke, as part of the process against the High Performance Centre, and those that actually spoke in favour of it, and being present at that meeting, those that were in favour of the High Performance Centre, a number of those said, in hindsight, consultation should have been a lot more open, transparent and accountable. And this is coming from those that are actually in favour of the High Performance Centre, and they made that comment at that meeting. So really, in this recommendation, rather than noting it, we should be actually reaching out to the people and saying, okay, this is a significant issue and we need to be able to, up our standard in basic consultation and transparency in the way we make decisions. Now, the manner in which on page 170, the officer's report says, in respects of motions 1 and 2, other than noting the motions. Again, I just think that is really a very lackadaisical answer to what those people came out on that night, and a lot of them were senior citizens and they had difficulty getting about, but they had a voice and they exercised their voice. And a number of them were in favour of the High Performance Centre, senior citizens, and there was a majority that were against. And I still think that in respect of motions 1 and 2 above, other than noting the motions, here we go again, there is no further action for council to consider. I disagree with that. I think that any of those motions that were passed at the level of consultation in motion number 1, undertaken by Clarence Council with respect, does not constitute comprehensive community consultation and was insufficient for such a significant issue. We can do something about that, and we could have had it in the recommendation to say, yes, look, perhaps next time we will advance and go forward with a proposal that will reach the majority of the people, rather than a 3-week consultation process that occurred before Christmas in relation to whether or not this goes out to consultation. It went out to consultation, and then council started to make a decision in relation to it. I'm not happy with this recommendation because it treats those people, whether they're for an AFL stadium, AFL High Performance Centre, I should say, or against. They deserve to have some comment as to whether or not this council agrees or does not agree with the consultation process. And one of those persons who actually asked a question on the night and quoted this, our strategic plan, which caters for public consultation, getting the people involved in issues which are contrary to the people.
Thank you, Councillor James. Any other colleagues wishing to make a contribution? Councillor Hume, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I wholeheartedly support the officer's recommendation. I do agree that the motions passed at the public meeting be merely noted. And I'll go through them in a minute and explain why, but I just find it ironic that when people complain about a survey that had about 2% of Clarence residents represented and saying, well, that doesn't really represent the views of Clarence, cannot then purport to say that a public meeting that was attended by less than 1% of Clarence residents, is somehow representative of the whole of Clarence. We don't necessarily know what the numbers are on each side, and I suspect that there are, out of those opposed and in favour of the high performance centre at the current proposed site, it's probably about roughly even, but there's probably a huge part of the municipality that doesn't have a view on it at all as well. But having said that, going through the motions, we've got motion 1 and 3 in relation to the consultation. Now, it's worth noting that some people around this table who talk about whether the consultation process was adequate, mind you, voted against consultation happening in the first place. I agree with the petitioners that the consultation process could have been improved, that there are things that we've learnt from it, but I don't agree that it was insufficient. Yes, there were some people who weren't aware of it and missed out. It was a tight time frame, but in that tight time frame, I think with what they had to work with, our officers did an excellent job. And that was a time frame we had to meet, otherwise the consultation would have been irrelevant because we would have missed the deadline to submit a bid. It was widely publicised, and it was the second highest response of any survey that Clarence has done. And I believe that's actually an excellent result. But it's not a referendum. It's a snapshot of community views on various things around the high performance centre and possible locations. And it's also one of a number of inputs that went into council's decision. It's not a poll, it's not a referendum. Now, in relation to motions 2 and 6, I believe it was necessary to put forward Rezoning Parklands and Charles Hand Park as the site in order to secure a winning bid. And this is, it's because it met the criteria that were set down. The site is accessible by vehicles and public transport, close to businesses and services. It offers easy access to CBD, stadium and airport, and its proximity to Rezoning College offers work placement, sporting and other education opportunities. Now, opponents of the high performance centre say, well, okay, there are benefits to a high performance centre and it's great to have it in our city, but have it somewhere else. But the truth is, other than that location, there is no location in Clarence that either has constraints that prevent it from being used, or that would be favoured to the Kingston Twin Ovals. And without selecting the particular site that we did, I believe it's almost certain that we would have lost this enormous opportunity with huge social and economic benefits to our city, and it would have gone to Kingston instead. Motion 4 in relation to the City Heart Plan. Well, the City Heart Plan is going ahead, and all the money that's been spent on the City Heart Plan and the consultation on the City Heart Plan is going to input into that. It's worth noting that in relation to the public open space that's going to form part of the City Heart, there is still be somewhere in the order of, I believe, and the exact number I guess isn't known until the detailed designs work, but it'll probably be around 30 hectares available in the Rezoning Parklands, which is a huge amount of land. And the City Heart can be reconfigured around that, but the public consultation that input into what facilities people would like to see there and how they would like to see that green open space connected with our city is going to happen anyway. It's going to be used. And in fact, we'll actually have the best of both worlds. We'll have the high performance centre and its benefits and the green open space. And I'm sorry I didn't get to motion 5.
Thank you, Councillor Hume. Anyone else wishing to contribute? Councillor Tarko, thank you.
I'd like to start by thanking those who put forward the survey and who attended that public meeting. It's amazing to see such a level of community engagement and so much passion for saving the green spaces that are so valuable to us. I would argue that this indicates that we need more transparency. I would argue that we should be developing guidelines with the community for what reasonable consultation looks like. We should be aiming to meet or exceed that bar, which Councillor Hunter already referenced, that we've set with the community. If a developer is not willing to be open with the community and to engage with consultation that actually engages and meets that standard that we've set, we should be pushing back against the developer and advocating for those consultation guidelines and refusing those who would have us act without sufficient consultation, those who would have us act without transparency. The statutory requirements are really, really weak. We should strive for such a high standard that we so far exceed those requirements as to render them completely irrelevant. We can do better, and we must do better. We owe it to our constituents.
Thank you, Councillor Darko. Anyone else wishing to make a contribution? Councillor Walker, thank you.
Thank you. The meeting on the 15th did occur, and the motions were the overwhelming sentiment of those who attended. They shouldn't be dismissed out of hand. The meeting did require 1,000+ signatures to occur, and over 400 people did turn out on a very cold May evening. The meeting was an inevitable result of how poorly council, and that's the collective us, not staff, have handled the matter. Everyone throws the word consultation around the table, and some state if you like, a hindsight fashion, the shortcomings of previous consultation endeavours. Well, I would note that in that October night around consultation, it was a bare 7-5 vote to go out. And that was because I suspect, the 5 of us that didn't vote had significant concerns about how it was put up. Significant concerns. And, I would suggest that what council decided to adopt on that night was quite a parsimonious process. And again, that's on us, not on our staff. Something of this nature, we'd probably have to dig into our pockets and do some paid advertising so that it's very hard for anybody to say they weren't aware. We have to cough it up, stimulate the local media. We make the most of things like we did on the merger thing and put it in the rates notice. And again, to try and find a way together, it probably would have involved some community meetings as well. And I think it's not like we didn't have history to tell us where we don't always get it right. But the timelines were weak, and a weak and servile council didn't have the fortitude to push back and say what's being asked was unrealistic and not durable. And here we are. And how confident are we that a heads of agreement is going to be ticked off as we go down the track? The Parklands option was named up, but the split option during that survey, including the Parklands and Charles Hand Park, wasn't really put forward as the main way forward. And there's some history wars going on that somehow the Charles Hand Park and Parklands was a compromise around the horseshoe of how we should go forward. That's not quite how I remember it. I remember the survey being well underway and the likes of DSG actually figuring out their hills are quite steep and quite challenging, and we want the slightly other hill on the other side of the road as a bit of this hill. It wasn't us that said, this would be awesome, we'll take both. It was put to us that if we had to have a favourable bid, that would be a good way forward. Because otherwise Kingborough will get it. Kingborough will get it. Kingborough, 15 kilometres away from Macquarie Point, will get it. By the way, we can't submit something 13 k's away at Cambridge. We can't submit something 15 k's away in the Clarence Plains because Kingborough will get it. And this is one of the reasons we've ended up in the mess. The whole bottom line was proximity is what counted. And if people would have just been more upfront about that, some of the hard feelings around why Gilston Bay didn't get a look in, why other sites at 7 Mile Beach Centre aren't in the mix, could have been dissipated. But we are where we are. You know, I find it interesting to have gone to that meeting in May, because amongst the representatives were, you know, people that I hung around in my misspent teenage youth. There were one couple that even, you know, hosted me when I played with their son when we were both in kinder. And that's not to say that on the other side of the ledger I haven't had lots of people that I know also telling me that they just want the centre built. People that I associate with just want the centre built, they don't really care where. But we have a stewardship role in this job. We have a role to think about the immediate, but also what happens here in decades that pass beyond us. And that is why I couldn't countenance the parklands, because the bottom line is it's a site that exceeds the botanical gardens. It is a site worthy of becoming a central park. It is a site that will give this council an edge over our rivals as far as attracting and retaining business. It gives us an edge potentially as we try to densify a CBD with residential dwellings, because it would be a great space to recreate in. So here we go, and here we are. And it's such a tragic thing, because the High Performance Centre should be a good news story. You know, put in the right place, it's something that would delight our community and unite our community. But we've mishandled it, and here we are. We dropped the ball. And, yeah, the meeting did happen, as I say, and it's given DSG all they need if they want to change their mind now. And I don't think the AFL would want that, because part of their motivation is, again, that proximity to activity.
Thank you, Councillor James. Councillor Walker, sorry. Anyone else wishing to make a contribution? Councillor Mulder, thank you.
Thanks, Mayor. I think it's unanimously agreed that the consultation wasn't what it should have been. I voted for the consultation, not against the consultation. I understood its limitations, and at that time, I bound myself to the results of that consultation. And it was a good, strong response, even though we may not have quite understood what it meant, other than a vague concept of a high-performance centre in the parklands. And what I thought would have been a really handy thing to have done is to have gone out to consultation with some indicative diagrams about what was actually proposed, what the footprints of those proposals would be, what the landscaping and stuff like that would have been, and then we would have had some information around for which people to form a judgment. Sure, it could have had longer time, but we all know that's not the way the whole thing works. And you can talk about the short consultation time, and we've discussed planning matters here, and Tasmania is unique in the Commonwealth in the fact that we have only 6 weeks to judge an application. That's the planning laws. So to suggest that we can't judge an assessment or consult on an assessment is a matter you need to take up with those who decide what these timeframes are. The City Heart, as it turns out, had a much lower response, even though everyone talks about how important it was and how we should stick to that plan. If we stick to the City Heart plan that was advertised, that got such a low response and was so well supported, at the last look, there were 2 apartment blocks of social housing planned for Charles Hand Park area. Where is the community outrage about the destruction of the parklands, the bulldozing of the parklands over that particular anomaly? That's a question I will put to you, because I suspect the footprints of those 2 blocks of flats would be greater than a high-performance centre. And the indicative plan may have been able to give us some assurances about which parts the public would have access to, which parts would be landscaped, what the visibility of any of these buildings and things, like some facts to consult on. But anyway, we didn't do that, and that's where we've ended up with a gap of misinformation, what I believe to be misinformation, but how would I know? I haven't seen the information yet. So that's my position. I will note this report. You cannot do anything else because it's an accurate reflection of what the meeting did. And it's available for any of the councillors around this table to bring to this or the next council meeting any of those motions for us to debate, discuss and talk about. The only one that I haven't done is when I get this overwhelming community rejection, overwhelming thing, is I look forward to the opponents of this proposal suggesting that we have an electors' poll. Because if my inbox is right, you'll lose it.
Councillor Goyne, thank you.
I just wanted to say that first off, sorry that I wasn't actually able to attend the meeting at the last minute. I had a very cantankerous, sad, sick, small human, which I didn't think everybody would like to hear screaming.
I take exception to that.
But unfortunately, Councillor Mulder turned up anyway, despite me trying not to. I wanted particularly to thank both Councillor Mulder and Councillor Hume for saying exactly what I was planning on saying, the 1%, and also the Charles Hand Park social housing. The 1% of those that did turn up on the night, I do thank them for going. I do wish I could have attended. It's interesting how, you know, as we speak, that how varied our inboxes are, because mine has been inundated with support. I also, after the meeting, was inundated by people that attended that were for the High Performance Centre in the location and didn't feel safe to speak on the night. So, you know, we can all take with a grain of salt. That's the idea of consultation. We're all going to get varied views. And I think the thing that we continually demonstrate is that each one of us was elected for a reason, and we each bring a different part of that demographic to the table. And on the night, we made the decision that we could with the information that we had. I believe that we did the best that we could with that information. Could it have been better? Absolutely. Hopefully it'll be better next time. But we've made the decision, and I think it's really important to note this report, note the hard work that went into those that went on the night. And I'd also like to thank particularly one of the emails I received after the night, congratulating, despite their initial reservations on the way that the meeting would be conducted, congratulating those that ran the meeting on how unbiased the meeting was and how successful the meeting was held. And I really do congratulate, because I know that there are a lot of concerns in the lead up to the meeting, and I just wanted to thank everybody who made it a safe place for those people to speak, and by the sounds of it, a productive evening. And I look, as I said, I note the outcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Goyne. Councillor Kennedy.
Thank you, Mayor. Just one small thing from me, because we've sort of moved off topic, which is the recommendation, I think. So I might just add something to consultation, which we've spoken about a lot in my time in council. And I go back to that wonderfully award-winning piece at 7 Mile Beach. Trust me, as a resident, they're still not happy with how the consultation happened. You know, this is what we live with. And someone around this table, I can't remember who it was at a recent meeting, and then it's got out into the wider community that the twin ovals at 7 Mile Beach is back on the table as an option. Guess what? The community's up in arms over that. So, you know what? It's really hard, but sometimes you've just got to make those hard decisions.
Thank you, Councillor Kennedy. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and I shall also be brief with my contribution. I did attend the meeting, and I love public meetings. I think they're a pleasure to attend. I congratulate the community for getting together and getting the necessary signatures to trigger the calling of that meeting. I know how much hard work goes into collecting signatures, so well done, and kudos to those who put in the hard work to ensure that it happened. I thank the council staff and the facilitators for ensuring that the meeting did run very smoothly and professionally, regardless of where I think people sat on the various spectrums of opinions. You know, you always get some passion at these sorts of events, and that was demonstrated, but not in a way that I felt was particularly unhealthy. There are always perhaps some comments that you might like to see left, but that's how it goes. But I overall really enjoyed the opportunity to go along, as I do to every public meeting. I also went to the Save the Parks rally. I think Councillor James and I had the opportunity to attend that prior to this, the public meeting being held. Enjoyed engaging with the community at that particular event. Also, I'd like to thank those people who've reached out to me post the public meeting. I promise you I am making my way through my inbox and replying to people as I can get to it. Some people having different issues, perhaps require some different responses as more information comes to hand. And, and I guess reflecting on Councillor Hunter's words, I think movable feast, quite apt for these situations. And at the end of the day, people are elected to make decisions, and we can talk about elector polls all we like. They're non-binding. It's appropriate that we elected to this place and those elected to other places get on with the job of making decisions as they're required to, and are quite rightly held accountable for those decisions at the appropriate place, which is the ballot box, when those periodic cycles come around. And that's something that applies to all of us at all levels of government, and to which we owe our ultimate level of accountability. And we don't take lightly, I'm sure I can speak for everyone, and I've said this publicly, I have confidence that every single one of us is taking this very seriously. We're putting in enormous amounts of time and consideration to form the positions that we have to date and whatever we do in the future. So I'll look forward to the ongoing discussion and debate, and to see what information continues to come to hand to inform where things go from here. But a lot of unknowns still, and we'll see where it lands, and we'll all do our best, I'm sure, to continue to listen and to be accountable for the decisions we make.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And colleagues, I'll now enter the debate as a councillor, not as your mayor. I think we'd all agree that, that facts matter. It's important to note and must be clearly understood that not in two council meetings or workshops did any of us, elected members, question the consultation process being undertaken. And clearly there was no need to. The consultation was run in the same vein as the consultation that we won a national award for, being the 7 Mile Beach Local Area Plan consultation. Our consultation processes are exemplary, run by highly qualified and capable council officers. In fact, in discussing the sample size, and as Councillor Hume pointed out, this consultation was second only to the Kangaroo Bay community consultation. Discussing the sample size and the response rate we received for this consultation, according to the experts at EMRS, it was statistically robust sample size. So you can disagree with the decision, but you shouldn't pick on the process because you just don't like the outcome, because that's not doing the facts justice. So in preparation for tonight, I thought it would be worthwhile to go back to the video recording of the 9th of October council meeting. I would encourage anyone interested here in the gallery or at home to go back and also rewatch the debate on the High Performance Centre consultation. And I did this principally to see whether any elected members argued that the consultation process was flawed or deficient. Now, none did. No one did. The upshot is that for all councillors, no one raised concern with the consultation process. But 7 said it was important that the consultation process occur to help inform the council's ultimate decisions. The 5 who have consistently voted against all did so for reasons of location, with literally no mention of the consultation plan, and in most cases didn't want any consultation to occur at all, because they just didn't want the land to be used for a high performance centre. It wasn't lack of consultation. That was not raised by any of the 5 that voted against that motion. So colleagues, this is a big decision for our community, and I thank you all for the way that you've conducted yourselves. The public meeting was instructive, interesting, and I'm sure we've received a myriad of responses, as we all have. There are differing views on this. It is important to keep it respectful. It is important to keep it, in mind the best long-term performance of our city. That's what we're all here to do. I'll now hand over and I'll invite Councillor Warren for her right of reply. Thank you, Councillor Warren.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, colleagues, for some very generous comments. Councillor James, who has left the room, would have liked the motion to be a little bit more generous to the movers. I'm sorry that that's not the case, and I think it is still worth noting what occurred at the public meeting. And that there is the opportunity to bring those motions in future meetings. There's been a lot talked about consultation. My reading of the room is that the majority of you feel that there's room for improvement. There's always room for improvement. We know that we can do it well. We know that we can do it better. So I think that's not without... that's worth noting. I thank those colleagues who've given me the opportunity to respond to voting against the consultation. You don't vote to go out to consultation on a plan that is bad. So, if we voted to have build, a 5-star council chambers down on Kangaroo Bay, would we consult on that, or would we say no? Let's not go anywhere near that. There was a talk about the numbers. Look, we don't know what the numbers are. We know the people who are passionate. We know that over 1,000 people are passionate enough to sign a petition, and 400 turned up to a meeting. So no, we don't know what the numbers are. We all get different responses in our inboxes depending on our networks. So it's no surprise that I got a lot of positive ones. There was a comment about how the Parklands was the only site possible because it met the criteria. It was the only site in Clarence that met the criteria. I would argue that the criteria, or the criterion, was that AFL said, we want that place. That was the criterion.
Point of order, Mayor. I think I've been misrepresented. I actually said that other sites either didn't meet the criteria or had other constraints on them.
Thank you.
So they had other constraints and that they weren't the one that the AFL wanted.
So we'll just take that then as you're withdrawing that, Councillor Warren. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Mulder.
So there was mention of an elector poll, and I know that that's got some interest in the community. I'm sorry, I do apologise. Put your phone away, Councillor Mulder.
I will when I turn it off.
I'm not a fan of electors' polls, and as has been mentioned, they are non-binding, as were the results of the survey. So it doesn't matter whether it was representative or not. Council was going to make the decision and not necessarily take that into account. So if we had an electors' poll, it doesn't matter what it shows, it's still non-binding. But I tell you what is a good indication. We had the best of all electors' polls recently. We had a state election. And may I point out to you that the highest vote getter in Franklin, which is a good match for the Clarence, was the Greens leader, Rosalie Woodruff. Highest number of votes in Clarence, Franklin, which suggests to me that Clarence residents care about their green space. Because if you vote for a Green representative, you're saying those are the values that are important to me.
It's a lot of licence there, Councillor. Thank you. Please take your seat. I'll put the motion. That is the recommendation. Right. I haven't... Anyway, so we'll put the recommendation. Thank you. Moved by Councillor Warren, second by Councillor Hunter. And all those in favour? And that's unanimous. Thank you very much. Moving now on to item 8.4.4, which is request for land under consent rezoning and subdivision 34, 36 and 46 Manhattan Street, Lauderdale. I understand there's alternative motion. Councillor James? Good timing.
Excellent.
Let's make an entrance. Yeah. Excellent.
Look,
do you have a seconder, Councillor James? Councillor Mulder, thank you. Councillor James.
Yeah, look, thank you, Councillor Mulder. May I say from the outset that this is slightly different, of course, to what...
Actually, sorry, Councillor James, can we just... if people would like to leave, please do so. We'll just stop the meeting because I appreciate people may have just come along for that item. You're very welcome to stay, by all means. We've got a few other items to discuss. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Thanks, Ned. Councillor James, we'll start again.
Thank you very much.
And has the alternative motion been circulated?
It has, thank you.
Mr. Figg, have you received a copy? That's important that... All right, thank you.
Good.
All right. While Miss Ellis is doing that, Councillor James.
Yeah, look, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Sorry.
For all those members of the gallery, it's actually on the big screens, but really what the crux of this motion is, the alternative motion is, and I'll read the key part of it, that Council, as the registered proprietor of 36 Monarta Street, Lauderdale, provides landowner consent for the inclusion of the lot in a request under Section 37 of the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act 1993 to rezone 34, 36 and 46 Monarta, Lauderdale from rural living zone B to general residential. And then under Part B, as the registered owner, provide landowner consent for the inclusion of lot in an application for permit under Section 40T of the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act. Now, the reasons for that is, and look, we're not going into what's going to occur later down the track. What we're dealing with here is the consent relates solely to authorising the applicant to include a small portion of council-owned land to provide a sufficiently wide access for a proposed, and I emphasise, a proposed future subdivision. So what we want to do is keep this matter alive. In other words, be able to grant landowners consent to take it one step at a time, and that is obviously it's going to be determined at another time, at another place, in this place, presumably, as to whether or not this actually gets a tick in the box, or in fact it's not regarded as a result of the officers providing the necessary information in their capacity as their technical people within this place. So that's down the track. What we want to do is give some hope that there may be a chance that once we do have an application before us, that will happen at that time. This is merely the first start of the process, and it's really just giving solely consent to include a small portion of council-owned land in order to provide a sufficiently wide access. That's all. And then again, and so the lots in question are currently zoned rural residential, but this part of Lauderdale, and this again is going to be a matter that has to be discussed in another time, is obviously part of the area is a rural residential zone in a virtual sea of residential land. But that is a matter that has to be determined at another time, and that also falls within the ministerial guidelines that may at that time be included as part of the urban growth boundary. So I seek council support.
Thank you, Councillor James. Councillor Mulder.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. My first question is this isn't in the planning items. So, and there was an email today that wasn't addressed to me, but to which I became privy, which asked the question about if this motion, alternative motion, were to pass tonight, would the subdivision application fees be due now, or would they be part of a subsequent application fee?
Mr Maher, are you able to shed any light on that, please?
Through you, Mayor. Thank you, Alderman Mulder, for the question. The application has been lodged with Council. However, there are no fees yet payable as the precondition of consent is required. Should Council provide consent, then we would send out an invoice to the applicant in order to pay the fees, and then once they were paid, process the application accordingly.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillor Mulder.
Yes, Mr Mayor, that causes me some grave concern because although we are in favour of this, there's a lot of work to be done before the application can be approved, and I would take this bit of time to, a few minutes I've got left, to actually explain why I believe I support this. I support the development, but that now may not be the time to go ahead because we would then be in a position where we have but 6 weeks to redevelop a structure plan, to redevelop and do all that sort of background work that would be required for the subdivision to be approved.
I don't know if that's correct, CEO.
Thank you. I'll defer to Mr Maher if I've got any of this wrong, but the application would be a subdivision application, not a structure plan issue, but there also is a requirement for rezoning. So part of the evidence base effectively would be missing, but it goes through a usual process of rezoning and a subdivision application. The two need to run in tandem.
The rezoning could not occur without the structure plan being amended and shifted in.
Mr Mayor.
Through you, Mayor. Whether or not Council supported it due to the absence of a supporting structure plan would be a matter to be considered as part of that assessment of the application. Councillor Mulder is correct in that there's a 42-day period in which Council should make a decision on the rezoning, but that can be extended. So opportunities would exist for the applicant to come back with an alternative proposal or additional information on that before Council was to consider it. However, if the intention was to undertake a structure plan, that would be a significant amount of work that would involve the engineering aspects and stormwater discharge, etc. However, there is no time limit on this owner's consent, so in theory it could apply for such an application that met that description at a later date.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mr Mulder.
That's extremely clear to some. Thank you for the advice. I just think that on the balance of that, it may be better that the application is withdrawn at this stage and we line some ducks up before we go. Or do we press ahead with the matter and run the risk of doing the developer $25,000? Well, of course, I wouldn't possibly refer to the gallery, but I get my message. So I'll be supporting this motion on the basis that this area here, we've come to a point in time where this area was originally zoned future urban, where people went out of their way and bought money on this, in this area on the understanding that they would later on be able to develop it. It subsequently turns out that a subsequent planning scheme said no, drainage issues, water issues and all those sorts of things, we're going to make it rural residential because we can't have the excess thing. Now, there are engineering solutions to these. Some of these have been proposed. Some of them have actually, as motions in this meeting, have come there and said, let's sort this out, let's move forward, and then let's go with the idea that we have an obligation, I believe, to implement some engineering solutions. One of the engineering solutions was an outfall into the Lauderdale Canal. And although that has been agreed, that that on the motion of this council that work was done, it then came back saying yes, it would solve the problems for now, but not in light of future or climate change or sea level rise. Well, that applies to all our solutions, including what we're doing down at Beach Street, including what we're doing in other areas. So the problem is that in the future, we need to future-proof our storm water. And that is quite possible. That is quite possible in the Lauderdale Canal. You can use the Lauderdale Canal. You can, if the sea level rises, form a weir, pump the water out, use it as a detention basin. You could also use part of it to provide a very safe, friendly beach and a parking area and a beach and a park area that could be enhanced Lauderdale. With the increased rainfall, you're going to have to do something. We are going to have to do something about the existing drainage already. It's not wide enough. These subdivisions are an opportunity to actually get some people to do some work, some engineers to come up with alternative engineering solutions that will allow for the development of this area, that will allow for the housing to come in, and also future-proof our stormwater systems and provide the capacity for them to have future pump-out solutions. Now, we've got to be very careful here that we build these things and we allow these things, but we have to look in mind towards the future. Here we have, in this particular area, someone with a higher outfall than the current outfall into Ralphs Bay. The outfall is 750 millimetres above the outfall that currently goes into Ralphs Bay. Whatever we do, with sea level rise predicted to 750, guess what the result is?
Yeah, Councillor Mulder. Anyone else wishing to speak to this motion? Councillor Walker and then Councillor Hunter. Thank you.
Thank you. And some clarification. We've had words like amended, and the word on the screen is alternative motion. This is an alternative motion to the motion listed in the agenda. Through you, Mayor, for some clarification from the General Manager. If this motion is successful, we've considered the motion, we've arrived at a position. However, if the alternative motion as presented to us tonight is unsuccessful, that also completes the matter in the agenda. Is that correct?
Well, I'll call on the CEO in a moment, but as was discussed on Friday, there may also be a move for a procedural motion as well.
And I guess, thank you for that, but I guess my understanding is that procedural motions in my time here are something that have just been done before something is considered, there's no discussion, and away we go.
Councillor Walker, I've given you the answer. If someone moves the procedural motion, it's before the chair. I have to put the procedural motion.
And I haven't had the question answered yet around the fact
If
that
you take a seat, I'll call on the CEO. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I think there's two options at that point. If a procedural motion was sought, then it's open to the Chair to accept that and push that through. In the alternative, the other way that this could be approached is that with the failure of the alternative motion, the original motion could be moved by a councillor as well. So one way or the other, the item on the agenda needs to be addressed in some way.
Councillor Walker, anything else you'd like to? Thank you. Councillor Hunter.
I'm slightly confused, but anyway, I know you've done your best to try to explain it. It's my misgivings that I'm confused about. But at any rate, I will address the alternative motion that's before us now, and which I do not support. In a previous role, I've actually drafted General Manager's consent for another council. And it pained me greatly that as an open space planner, you knew that at that time, council should not back General Manager's consent. But the council didn't have the guts to do it. So I commend our council officers for putting forward the original recommendation to refuse this. There's very good logic in the officer's report as to why we should refuse it, and I very much believe that is the case, mainly because the Southern Tasmania Regional Land Use Strategy, which we keep talking about, is currently being reviewed. Why can't we just wait until that's done? If this area is to be developed, it will be identified in that document and will be included in the urban growth boundary. Also, this doesn't align with the current Lauderdale structure plan. I'm wholeheartedly behind holistic planning for future growth and development that is equitable to everyone in the community. Now, yes, I understand people purchased land in this area previously as investments. People make investments with inherent risk. Now, at that time, we didn't have the modelling that we do now. That was a risk that was borne by the purchasers of that land. That's unfortunate, and maybe there are other avenues that can be addressed that is outside of this council meeting. I therefore commend what was in the initial officer's report, and I seek colleague support in not supporting the alternative motion put forward.
Thank you, Councillor Hunter. Any other colleagues wishing to make a contribution? Councillor Warren, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Mr Mayor. I'm also very confused by this, and I notice you're normally fairly tight on noise from the gallery. There is a bit of a buzz tonight and has been in previous motions. So, again, I request that we all respect each other when somebody is speaking.
Councillor Warren, thank you. I'll take care of that. Thank you. You take care of your business.
That was my request.
Talk to the motion, Councillor Warren, while you've got the call.
So I'm confused because I understood that this motion, that the applicant was withdrawing the motion that is in the agenda because the officers had given very good reasons why it should be refused. It would have made more sense to me if that procedural motion had come to us first. So I will not be supporting this.
Councillor Warren. Any other colleagues? Councillor Darko, thank you.
Thank you. In line with Councillors Hunter and Warren, I cannot in good conscience support this alternative motion. As mentioned, there are some really, really good arguments as to why this shouldn't go ahead, and the alternative doesn't make a sufficient case as to why those arguments should be ignored. Particularly, while it is agreed that the land within the proposal, and I'm quoting page 199, is adjacent to and shares a common boundary with urban land within the UGB, it is considered that the proposal does not represent a logical extension to the land, evidenced by the need to include land set aside for public recreation to facilitate the development. It is also considered that a 45-lot subdivision is not small in the context of the immediate area, particularly evidenced by the fact that such development will warrant upgrading of Monada Street for the new intersection or will further increase traffic on substandard intersections discussed later. Furthermore, the proposal is clearly contrary to the adopted Lauderdale Structure Plan. Accordingly, it is considered that the development does not meet the requisite test under STRLIS for residential development outside the UGB. I urge councillors to consider the very strong wording that was in the original recommendation and to vote accordingly.
Thank you, Councillor Darko. Anyone else wishing to make a contribution? Councillor Hume, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, the arguments that Councillors Hunter, Warren and Darko have put against this alternate motion are based on a premise that the officers have adopted in their report, and look, it's a very good and comprehensive report, but a premise that in considering whether to grant landowner consent, the planning merits of the proposal should be considered. It is also noted in the report that Section 37 of Looper and that legal advice was sought on this basically does not provide any guidance as to what council should consider when it comes to whether or not to grant consent. And so therefore it's open to us as councillors to say we might actually apply different criteria. My view is that the planning assessment should be dealt with as the planning assessment when a rezoning application is put forward. You consider the provisions under the Land Use and Planning Approvals Act, Section 40T, etc. I believe it is. I'm not sure the exact. And then you have the planning application that happens parallel to that rezoning request. Now, I agree that there are going to be some big challenges in getting both those applications up, particularly in terms of the Lauderdale Structure Plan. As Councillor Mulder observed, it's open to the proponent to look at some engineering solutions to those challenges, or to provide some evidence or advice that contradicts the very sound advice I believe we had through the Lauderdale Structure Plan. But I believe that the planning assessment should take place separately, and that what we should consider is that the request to grant landowner consent, does it actually impede the intended use of that land? And the part that the consent is sought over is merely an access strip. And to my mind, it actually, should the development go ahead, the subdivision, not saying it necessarily would, but it could potentially enhance the use of that land because it provides more residences close to an area where it's been identified as a recreation space, and it creates road access to that space. So for that reason, I will be supporting Councillor Mulder's motion.
Actually, Councillor James's, but...
oh, sorry.
Thank you, Councillor Jim. Anyone else wishing to make a contribution? Deputy Mayor, thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and I thank councillors for their contributions. I think Councillor Hume's contribution has hit the nail on the head for me. Also, I will be supporting the alternate motion before council this evening. Obviously, at the previous council meeting, I did raise the issue of Central Lauderdale and my concerns about the stormwater issues and other infrastructure issues in that area, and the fact that they've been outstanding for such a very long time. Unfortunately, my motion to try and get a bucket of money from the federal government wasn't supported at that particular meeting, which is how it goes, but nevertheless the problems still persist and won't go away. That being said, this motion, and isn't the General Manager's decision, this actually comes through, as Councillor Hume indicated, refers to both sections 37 and 40T in respect of landowner consent in relation to this particular proposal, not 51(1)(b), as some may previously have thought. For that reason, it's entirely appropriate for Council to support the proposal in front of us this evening, because it does nothing more than provide an opportunity for the advancement of a case in the future, which will rise and fall on its own merits in respect of the planning provisions that are applicable in the usual way. So there's nothing extraordinary about that. And so all the checks and balances that we would expect to see under the scheme will be applicable. So who can foretell how that will go, what the recommendations will be in the future? This doesn't require us to consider the merits of any potential or future application. That's not for us to decide right now. But generally as a default position, me personally in previous roles, I've always taken the view that where possible, I would support the opportunity for people to make their case or to put forward their idea or their proposal in whatever form I can. Doesn't mean I'm necessarily going to support that moving forward, but I do support the general principle of providing the avenue for people to take an opportunity to put their proposal forward. So that as a point of principle for me, understanding the particular legislative clauses as well, and all of the views that I have also strongly held about Central Lauderdale have me in a very comfortable position to be able to support the alternative motion and seek council support to do likewise.
Excellent, thank you. Are there any other speakers to this motion? There being none, Councillor James, your right of reply, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, as listed, this is merely authorise the applicant to include a small portion of council-owned land to provide a sufficiently wide access for a proposed future subdivision. And that may rise and fall on what is actually put forward at that time, but that is down the track. This is what we're dealing with here, and the comment that has been stated in here by the Chief Executive Officer. The current portion of land was provided for public recreation and is proposed for inclusion in a public road. I seek council support.
Thank you, Councillor James. I'll put the motion, which is the alternative motion, seeing in the name of Councillor James. All those in favour? Against? So carried. Moving now on to item 9.1. It's a motion on notice, seeing in the name of Councillor Walker. Councillor Walker, is there a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Goyne. Councillor Walker.
Thank you. So the motion is in two-parter. The first one, that Council affirms its aspiration to be the home of a suitably located high-performance centre for the Tasmanian AFL Devils team, and as a matter of urgency requests representatives of Cricket Tasmanian Devils AFL Club and relevant state government stakeholders to investigate opportunities for reuse of Blunston Arena, including as a potential site for a future AFL high-performance centre. And I try to present this motion as a way forward, as a circuit breaker, a reset and an opportunity to affirm around this table that we do have strong support around the table for a suitably located AFL high performance centre. Now that should be a calorie-free, easy decision to take. But the other bit really matters too, and that is, trying to work as a catalyst for a way forward for Blunston Arena's future. It is indeed the most significant piece of sporting infrastructure in Clarence, and until something gets built in Macquarie Point, I would make the case that probably in the whole of southern Tasmania. As I said earlier, being the home of an AFL high performance centre should unite and delight a community, but somehow we've ended up in a state of division. And Blunston Arena over the years has from time to time had a degree of division, but with Cricket Tasmania indicating its intention to make a fresh start elsewhere, we have the potential to bring the community together and host the best high performance centre in the nation. There is no location that comes close. There's a beach in front. It is known around the world for its location, and most people would struggle to name where the high performance centres are other than their own team. So here we go. And would it need some work? Absolutely. But here's a fun fact. The Empire State Building commenced on March 7, 1930 using 1930s building methods and equipment and infrastructure. Took 1 year and 45 days to build. So, if you plan things right, if you get that legwork done, you can actually make things happen in a pretty good time. What I say now, I actually say as someone I consider, to be a straight shooter and a friend of the AFL, a friend that wants to just tell things as they are. The motion does hope to bring key stakeholders together, but I'd actually say it's well past time that the AFL probably ate a little bit of crow. And what I mean by that is that, we need to, when considering the future of a place like Blunston, we need to work together. We need to understand that for all its potential, there would indeed be, scheduling set out for years ahead, and you're going to have to talk with different people and understand what are their needs and challenges and find a way forward. But this could be a magnificent utilisation of an asset. It could be a way to, if you like, partially fund cricket's new home as well. A great reuse. Tasmania having an AFL team is a dream that's preceded my lifetime, and I'm excited that it is coming our way, even though 4 franchises later than it should have been. And I am looking at Freo, Port Adelaide, Gold Coast and GWS when I say that statement. We do really risk this fantastic asset in our community potentially becoming a stranded asset, and that's why we need key players sitting around a table and talking together what its future might be. It might come to nothing, but it might actually offer a magnificent solution. It also allows for planning ahead of time. When we think about things, I think we need to be really concerned about the fact that the quicker, cheaper, easier build for the AFL High Performance Centre is at Kingborough. It is. It's not the best build, it's not the optimal location, but if DSG want to take the path of least resistance, that's where they're heading. And we've pretty much given them a case as to why they can go down there. And that is why I hope that having something like this in the mix as a catalyst can highlight again our enthusiasm to be at the table, our enthusiasm to be the home, and an innovative way to reuse an asset that's already in place. I'm sure I'm going to have plenty of stuff to say when it comes to my reply, but I genuinely don't want Clarence to be the place where bold ideas come to die. But that takes give and take, and that takes innovation, and that takes collaboration.
Councillor Goyne, thank you.
I have been steadfast in constantly voting for any consultation. I would even vote for consultation for the 5-storey council chambers built on the waterfront. I'm all for that. I will also support any proposal that comes forward to keep our hat in the ring. I'm not entirely sure if that's actually what we're doing by throwing all these hats, but hey, why not? In fact, next meeting I'm thinking I might even throw my backyard in the mix, you know, it's big enough for 2 ovals. So I will be supporting this motion this evening, and I'm grateful for the opportunity for it to be put on the table, and we'll continue to support any and all that you bring forwards, just so that we can keep this fantastic opportunity in Clarence for the future of the citizens of Clarence.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just meet you. It's getting a bit warm again now. And thank you to Councillor Walker for this motion. And I'm just wondering, now that we're doing some sort of, big picture thinking, whether you'd actually consider taking your motion in 2 parts. Because I'd love to see B fleshed out as something. There's a number of you around the table that know that I've always had my sights set on potentially a council chambers around that oval, and that oval being could be affordable housing, or it could be a beautiful community ground for multi-purpose sports. So if we really want to think big about what we could do with that space, and there will be a number of you that will remember when we first talked about the City Heart Plan, and I kept saying, why isn't Blunston in the mix? And we've got areas of rural rain, and people go, no, it's just not part of it. And I would repeatedly say, this is one of the biggest assets we've got in this city, and we're not even actually considering it in the city heart. So I don't know how you feel, mover of the motion, but I would strongly think about separating the two, and let's look at what we can really do with B.
Thanks, Councillor Kennedy. Councillor Mulder.
It's a wonderful idea. In fact, I was reading the Mercury some months ago, and I saw I think a member of this council actually suggesting it. And it's a great idea. But that was in the context of Cricket Tasmania coming out in the middle of an election campaign, trying to get its hand on a bucket load of money to relocate, probably to the airport. That's where that idea came from. And people who are avid readers of the Mercury may have also noticed that a certain eminent Tasmanian promptly bucketed the idea and told me I didn't know what I was talking about. Subsequent media commentary and all the rest of it, because the whole idea is predicated on cricket getting its hands on what they thought was federal money but turns out to be state money to build an oval in a place they're not going to go. They are not moving out unless the taxpayers, stick their hand in their pockets and build something for them. And even if you did that, the Empire State Building may have been built in 1.25 years, but it was on land owned by the person who was building it, and it didn't require state and federal government money, unlike former President Trump's business empire. So you've got this situation where the principle is great, the idea is good, but the parties aren't there. They're not playing ball, and they have got their own load of money. I can't support this thing because it actually, Part B, risks the perception of Part A. Right? The fact is, this is a great idea, but the ducks aren't lined up and aren't likely to be for the next 10 odd years, 5 to 10 years, and certainly that is completely outside the scope of the contract that the state government, not us, the state government has. Cricket Tasmania I've dealt with that. Cricket faces the risk that Blunston Arena could become a stranded asset if Cricket Tasmania faces. How could such a thing be a stranded asset? Councillor Kennedy has pointed out what a magnificent council chambers ought to be. Imagine the view from the CEO's office down across the harbour, or the mayor's. Imagine the capacity to build a community hall which we were thinking about dumping right on this other piece of parkland between outside here, imagine how the community hall, a convention centre, more than enough offices for 100 staff, and we could return that use back to the community sports like the cricket, who we threw off there, and Clarence Football Club, who we basically threw off there except on game days, and how that could be returned into a community sporting and political centre and breathe much needed life back into the old Bellaree village. And while you're at it, how about making the owners of Bellaree Quay an offer they couldn't refuse so we can reoccupy our former council chambers, which we should never have got rid of. But I'd like to support this motion. The fact is it sends the wrong message about our commitment to the high performance centre. For people who don't want a high performance centre in the parklands, I'm sorry, but that really, in all said and done, is the only option on the table. And that's got to be the case. And that's why I would encourage you to think seriously about the lesser of the two evils, or, you know, achieving all the goals, and by giving some severe thought to actually saving the skate park, saving Charles Hand Park, not only from the AFL but also from the Housing Department flats, and reusing the old sporting facility on the old golf course and repurposing it back to the sporting facility it ought to be.
Thank you, Councillor Mulder. Anyone else wishing to speak? Councillor Warren, then Councillor Jones. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I too congratulate Councillor Walker for bringing this motion and starting a conversation, one that we probably should have had some time ago. I also stand tonight to support a high performance centre in Clarence. So much has been made about the benefits of a high performance centre, particularly for our youth and the programs that might be run for our youth. So if we're looking at the benefits, is it selfish to say it should be in Clarence? Because this is a Tasmanian team, not just a Clarence team. So we want this centre to be accessible to youth throughout the area, not just Clarence youth. Even in Rosny, anyone living other than the CBD will have to take 2 buses. I noticed that one of the pros of building it there was that it was on public transport. Well, it's not if you live at Glenorchy or at Kingston, or, you know, Clarendon Vale was maybe 1 bus trip. But, you know, there's been much made of it. It feels like blackmail. We've got to do this or it'll go to Kingborough. Well, you know, that's not such a bad outcome for the youth of Tasmania. It's still a difficult bus trip or 2 bus trips for most people, but maybe that can be addressed by actually getting our public transport sorted out. But if Kingborough is a valid option, then why not Clarence Plains? It's the same distance. And I would argue that the benefit to our youth in Clarence Plains would be far greater than in Rosny. There's lots to do in Rosny. The demographics are quite different. I think we could really... I hear the words game changer, and I'm not sure whether a pun is intended, used a lot in this debate. It could be a real game changer to have a facility like this in Clarence Plains. We had a letter that was tabled today from the AFL clubs at Clarence and Lauderdale. Last time I looked, Lauderdale was really close to Clarence Plains, and if that's one of the largest clubs in the municipality, how great would it be to have a high performance centre right on their doorstep? So thinking of it from a purely altruistic point of view, how do we get the best bang for our buck as Tasmanian taxpayers? Because this is going to be a cost to all Tasmanians. If we build in a difficult site that's going to be much more expensive to build on than, say, the Kingborough Ovals, that's going to cost us. That means that the state government is going to have less money for health, for housing, for education, for all those things that people keep telling me are important. So why wouldn't we want the state government to build this high performance centre in an easy location where it's going to benefit the community and it's going to be affordable and leave money left over for the other things? So, yes, it would be great to have it in Clarence, but as something that is for all Tasmanians, not just Clarence people, let's not be selfish. There are lots of arguments made about how it's going to boost our economy. One of the letters that I've received this week was a really interesting analysis of how green spaces boost the economy, and that cities who have developed a really vibrant city park have seen the benefits to people coming into the city centre and spending their money. And on a smaller scale, you could argue that Symonds Park is an example of that, that developing Symonds Park has brought people from all over Hobart to come and play in Lindisfarne and spend their money in the local shops. I'm not convinced that elite AFL footballers who have a cafe on the premises would go over to the Eastlands Food Court. Nothing against the Eastlands Food Court, they do great sushi, but I just think that we're perhaps overestimating the impact of the economic benefit in having it near a shopping centre. And as a very good point was raised at the public meeting, that in other states they've built it in more sort of, a vacant block, and the infrastructure has arrived around it. It's attracted housing, shops and economic stimulus. So if it's a choice of Rosny or Kingborough, why not make it Rosny, Blunston Arena, Clarence Plains? We don't want the Blunston to be a white elephant.
Councillor Warren. Councillor James, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and I'm glad that Councillor Walker has in fact added to the debate, and also I was looking back at the earlier matter in relation to the motions that were passed, and I could see that there was a motion that really would fall within another location within the High Performance Centre. But looking at what we have in front of us, I only want to deal with Part B because most of you know where I stand on Part A. And if it had been probably separated, then again it would have probably, in my mind, given me some food for thought.
Point of order.
I'm sorry, Councillor James. Is that a possibility, Councillor?
Oh, well, sorry, I'll put that. It's been moved by Councillor Kennedy, seconded by Councillor Mulder. If you're happy as the mover, and also the seconder, take it ad seriatim in two parts, A and B. Great, thank you. All right, thanks so much. Thank you, Councillor Kennedy. Councillor James, please.
Yes, so I assume now we're dealing with just Part A, and then we'll debate that. And is that how?
No. We're debating the two parts.
Oh, good. Okay.
What we will do, though, just to be clear, because stop the clock, please, Ms. Ellis, is that when we put the motion, it'll be put in two parts. It'll be Part A and it'll be Part B.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Dealing with Part B, I recall that in one of our local newspapers, one of our key cricket icons, David Boone, came out and made it quite clear, and I think he's on the board of Cricket Test.
He's the chairman.
Sorry, he's the chair. Okay, thank you. Okay, sorry. And my recollection of that at that time was that under no circumstances does Cricket Tasmania want to relocate or basically move to another location, and we're here to stay. Now, those words, here to stay, are my words, but I think in the context of the matter, that's pretty much what the chairperson said at that time. So, look, I don't think that is a matter that really needs to be taken on board. If you've got a key person within that organisation coming out and making it public, then really they're not going anywhere for the foreseeable future. And I think Mr Boone is going to be around for a lot longer because of his appeal and also his chairmanship in relation to Cricket Tasmania. I can go back in time, and I know when Dennis Rogers and I locked horns over the extension or the redevelopment of the Blunston Arena when we used to call it the Bellreeve Oval, and at that time there was a motion passed in this place that it be called Blunston Arena because of the sponsorship and because of the other factors that came into play. And at that time there was a lot of controversy. I tend to, I don't know why it is, but I tend to be in the midst of that, and it was quite clear that the people in the surrounding areas did not want to see the Blunston Arena develop to the extent to which it has now got to the stage where it is the wrong location in a residential area. And on my return from 7 Mile Beach last night, there was a game at Blunston Arena, and it took me an hour to get from River Street down to the to Cambridge Road because of the gridlock of the people exiting that location. So look, I don't think that is a factor that needs to be considered. As a matter of urgency, request, no, I don't think we should be doing that, and approach the relevant state government stakeholders to investigate opportunities. They've got their own mindset on what Blunston Arena is as part of stadium or stadia. I'm using the plural here.
Stadiums Tasmania.
Let's call them stadiums. Thank you, Mr Mayor. Stadiums Tasmania. And as far as I'm aware, they're going to continue to use that. It's a key area for sporting and the number of games that are obviously played there as part of the agreement between the state government and those football clubs on the mainland. So look, it's good for debate. It's great, you know, that at least we have the opportunity to discuss it, but I don't think it's something that we really need to bother about at this stage.
Any other colleagues wish to make? It's Councillor Darko, thank you.
Just want to commend Councillor Walker on bringing this motion before us, noting that from the ferry terminal it's 10 minutes walk to Blunston Arena, 15 minutes walk to Charles Hand Park, and 20 minutes walk to the former golf course or the parklands. We do have a golden opportunity before us here to indicate that we can work together, we can agree on something. Last time we discussed this, we had another option thrown in the mix, and we were told how it wasn't harmful at all to just add another option to the mix. And why doesn't this apply in this case as well? There's nothing being set in stone here. This is just about having a conversation. Can we not show that we can all come together, that we can support this, that we can act unanimously or near unanimously? I think that's something that we could really do to inspire a lot of confidence. So I urge other councillors to vote in support.
Thank you, Councillor Darko. Any other colleagues wishing to make a contribution? Councillor Hume, thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, it's obviously no surprise they'll be supporting Part A of the motion, that's for sure, and I would suspect it'll be unanimous. With Part B, I have to admit to having some difficulty with it. Now, earlier in the discussion about noting the outcomes of the public meeting, I made the point that I know that the opponents of the high performance centre in the current location, a lot of them have been saying, yes, we support a high performance centre somewhere in Clarence, but not, you know, where it's currently proposed. And then, you know, often a lot of the correspondence that we all receive suggests other locations. And the point I made in that debate earlier was I don't believe that there is another location that either is A, suitable to the criteria that for the location of the high performance centre, or is not otherwise constrained. The Blunston Arena option may potentially be suitable if it wasn't otherwise constrained, but the constraints are that you've got Cricket Tasmania with a current lease under there. Now, yes, there's been some talk about them finding another home, but they would need significant funding. That's something that's not going to happen for a number of years. In the meantime, they have a lease over Blunston Arena. They're operating there, and they will continue operating there during the time frame in which the High Performance Centre needs to be constructed and delivered. But in addition to Cricket Tasmania, there are actually a number of other users within Blunston Arena that would need to be consulted with and could potentially be disrupted by the proposal. The Tasmanian Football Club has also made it clear, and the Department of State Growth, that they need 2 ovals in connection with the High Performance Centre. So the question is, if you, for example, made Blunston Arena the primary oval, and you've got buildings in place, and they can be the buildings associated with it, where all the other facilities can put in place, where do you put the second oval? The closest potentially may be the Clarence District Cricket Club, who obviously don't want to move, or then if you go a bit further than that, Charles Hand Park. So, look, I take the point that, okay, as it was in relation to the motion that we passed about providing a third option of both ovals in the Rezoning Parklands, it doesn't do any harm to have the discussions and to consider another option. And for that reason, I guess I'm open to be convinced on this motion, but I do have concerns about how this can affect our relationships with relevant stakeholders, how, as Councillor Moulder pointed out in his contribution, it could affect Council's reputation, and also, the time that staff would spend on, pursuing this as a potential option. But like I said, okay, maybe it won't do that much harm. I'm open to be convinced, but I will listen to the debate, and I'll make my mind up at the end of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hume. Councillor Hunter, Deputy Mayor, you wishing to say anything? Councillor Hunter's not going to? No. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, like my colleagues before me, I am quite comfortable with Part A of the motion. I've also struggled with Part B. It seems to me that Part B talks about wanting to talk with relevant stakeholders, but then only talks about the site as a potential, including as a potential site for AFL High Performance Centre. I concur with Councillor Moulder's concerns that that could in fact be detrimental, and paraphrasing, correct me if I'm wrong, but I do think that could negatively affect the opportunities to secure a high performance centre. Further to that, I actually can't see how it could work practically, and Councillor Hume's touched upon this. Where would the second oval go? Because I can tell you there's no way that a high performance centre would have their athletes going from one spot to another spot where they're miles away from the actual high performance centre itself. So you've got one lot, let's say AFLW training one place and AFL training another, and somebody has to relocate to actually get to the facility, the indoor part of the facility. So I just can't see that ever being of interest to those stakeholders who are looking at what an AFL facility would actually need to be attractive in our city. So I would very much have liked the opportunity to just have something like that we engage with relevant stakeholders to look at, the future opportunities to reuse Blunston Arena, full stop, because that would be very open-ended. I don't think that this is actually intended to be that open-ended at all, and I think that's deliberate. But for that reason, I certainly won't be supporting Part B in its current form, and but happy to support Part A. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Before I call Councillor Walker, I'll also enter the debate now as a councillor and as your Mayor. And colleagues, as you know, Council undertook extensive investigation of many sites around the city during the initial stages of the High Performance Centre project, including Blunston Arena. and we're looking at the location design requirements provided to Council by the Department of State Growth, it became apparent that Blunston Arena did not meet the selection criteria for a high-performance centre. Simply put, the required building, ovals and car parking of the high-performance centre does not fit within the footprint of Blunston Arena, as the Deputy Mayor just touched on a moment ago. Between factoring in the site restraints and the significant displacement of sporting and charity organisations who both use the playing surface and have office space at the venue, it was deemed unworkable. Now, all that was detailed and stepped out very clearly in the report attached to the 11th of December 2023 Council meeting agenda. Let me be clear. We don't have a menu selection of potential high-performance centre options to choose from that meet the selection criteria and give us the opportunity to secure the high-performance centre for Clarence. We don't own the land at Gilston Bay. We don't own the land at Cambridge. Clarence Plains was deemed too far away and would not have been considered. And again, we are not the sole landowner of the Bayview site. And as mentioned earlier, there are numerous community and professional organisations playing and working at a Blunston Arena who would be displaced. From my perspective, this matter is very simple. We asked the community if they wanted to see the high-performance centre in Clarence. The old golf course and Charles Ham Park were the only options that we owned. They are close to services and public transport, and these sites have the necessary room to accommodate the development. When the AFL High Performance Centre is built in the city of Clarence, be assured, colleagues, it will be somewhere on the old golf course or Charles Ham Memorial Park. As you all know, my clear preference and publicly stated unequivocal position is for both ovals and all associated infrastructure of the AFL High Performance Centre to be developed on the former golf course and leave Charles Ham Memorial Park as it is. So, for the sake of our team, our state and the many generations to follow, let's just get this done. I will be supporting Part A, but for the reasons just outlined, I cannot support Part B. Councillor Walker, your right of reply, please.
Thank you. Again, we hear the leprechaun of the Clarence Plains being too far away when it is exactly the same distance as Kingborough. There's a few points to go over. When we were going through the consultation, it wasn't open that Cricket Tasmania were looking to be elsewhere, and I think if that would have been a far more prominent part of the debate. It is now, it's real. There would be no better location to go to a post-GF grand final victory than at Blunston Arena. Hoping to do that in 2035. I won't entertain Alderman or Councillor Mulder's New York politics matters because that'll get me into trouble very quickly. The quite fact of the matter is when it comes to the costs of refurbishing Blunston, yeah, they're there, but boy howdy, the state is already digging its hand big time as it tries to dig into that hill there. I've split it for the sake of unity. I could have left it the other way and tried to coerce people into saying, make sure that you vote against an unsuitably located place and put it around. That's not what I'm trying to do here. I'm not trying to use this as a way to divide and profit. I'm trying to look for ways to unite a community that has needlessly become divided on something that should be something to celebrate. But here we go. I do thank everybody's contributions, and Alderman or Councillor Warren rather did note the public transport elements and challenges. They're much bigger in Kingborough actually, but it was good to see that Councillor Darko pointed out the fact that it's a 10-minute walk, or it's 3 blocks from the ferry terminal. It is a far more accessible site. And as far as economic contributions go, making that the home will have a far better economic contribution to the Bellerive village than what will be eked out and shifted around Rosny. There's some other points. This thing isn't in the bag by any stretch, and that's on us. We could have potentially on the night when we considered it had 10 votes at that time, and it might have caused some community friction, and I would have worn it all. I would have been the sacrificial anode of whatever you want to call it, displeasure, anger, whatever. If that's what it took to preserve the parklands, that would have been cheap. We didn't decide to do that. We've decided what we've decided. But I'd just point you out, you're voting against a conversation. You're voting against a way forward to start planning on a big asset. And the binding word that's getting you stressed is the word including. Spare me. I hear nothing but inclusion around this table, and yet that word there is a trigger word tonight. So it is an opportunity. It's a strategic asset. This would have been a very good move forward.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. And as discussed, I'll put the motion ad seriatim in two parts. And the first part is part A. The Council affirms its aspiration to be the home of a suitably located high-performance centre for the Tasmania Devils AFL team. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you, colleagues. Oh, sorry. Sorry. Can we do it again? Sorry. Show of hands, please. All right. Thank you. Against?
You convinced me otherwise. Against.
Against. They don't need the commentary, Councillor James, but thank you. Moving now on to part B of the motion, and that is that this council, as a matter of urgency, requests representatives from Cricket Tasmania, the Tasmania Devils AFL Club, and relevant state government stakeholders to investigate opportunities for reuse of Blunston Arena, including as a potential site for a future AFL high performance centre. All those in favour? Against? And that's lost. Thank you, colleagues. Moving now, before we move to item number 10, councillor question times, I will just deal with an issue that arose earlier tonight, and that was a point of order by Councillor Warren. And just make the point that there is strictly no rule prohibiting elected members from moving around or talking during proceedings. However, it is important that we don't disrupt or interject, etc., or cause disruption. The particular item of our rules that I point to, our council policy, reads, when an alderman, which should be councillor, but these are antiquated and need updating, when an elected member is addressing the chairperson, no other elected member is to A, converse loudly, or B, create any disturbance, or C, interrupt the speaker or interject except to request any words spoken be noted, or to call attention to a point of order, or to call attention to the want of a quorum. May I suggest that we are very respectful in this chamber. I note that 3 of our members, a quarter of us, have spent time in State Parliament where the rules are very different. But please, I'm comfortable with colleagues when you need to move around the chamber, talk to the CEO or Ms Ellis to get advice to do so, but please be respectful of other speakers. If any colleagues have an issue with that, please come and see me. But that is my ruling on this matter. It's not unreasonable from time to time during a debate to go and seek advice from a colleague or one of the officers. Moving now on to item number 10, councillor question time. There are no questions on notice. Questions to answers without notice previous council meeting listed in the agenda. Questions without notice. Are there any questions from the floor? Starting this evening with Councillor Kennedy. Councillor Warren.
A couple of questions. My first question is, we had an addition to the Code of Conduct. I can't remember what we called it, but we tabled that at the beginning of this year. What was it? The Statement of Expectations.
Councillor Mulder, please don't interrupt.
Thank you for that clarification, Councillor Mulder. In Part 7 of the Code of Conduct, at Part 2, it does say a councillor must listen to and respect the views of others in council. So my question is it possible to listen and be conducting a side conversation?
Councillor Warren, you'd be amazing. Some of us are multi-skilled. We've been doing it for years. If colleagues wish to move around the chamber, seek advice from officers during a debate, it's my decision that they're able to do so. If you have a problem with that, then by all means stop your contribution and wait for that person to stop speaking as we did earlier tonight. But it's not for you to point out the behaviours of others in this chamber. It's just not. That's my position as chair, to allow the Deputy Mayor to seek advice from the CEO. That's not unreasonable.
But it was...
No, you've got my decision. Thank you. Your second question.
My second question...
Don't be curt, Councillor Warren. Just be polite, please.
My second question...
Thank you.
through you, is may I have some information, please? A number of residents have expressed concerns about the tagging of trees in Charles Hand Park. Could I have an explanation, please, as to what the tagging is?
CEO.
Yeah, thank you. As part of the Department of State Growth's initial investigations of the site, you will have noticed that there has been some boreholes and other work done for geotechnical work.
Not in the trees. Sorry.
The other part of that work was engagement of North Barker to do environmental assessments, and the tagging of the trees is part of that process, so that they have a reference point back to those when they do their report. So it's an identification number, that's all.
Councillor Darko. Thank you. Councillor Goyne.
I just have the one topic. It may be a two-part question though. Yesterday in Area 4 of the 7 Mile Beach car park, a horse and rider were injured by an off-lead dog that proceeded to lengthily and systematically attack the horse and its rider. It actually took the intervention of a second horse and rider before the owner came and got the dog under control. My question is that the matter was referred to the police, who referred it to the council, who then referred it to Parks and Wildlife. Who is responsible to enforce some sort of effective dog control management on the dog? That's probably the first part of my question.
Okay, shall we ask Mr Brennan to join us, please? This will be a test to see whether he's actually watching proceedings.
He was. Sorry. Didn't mean to be difficult.
Yeah. Mr Brennan, good evening. Did you hear the question? Wonderful. Are you able to provide an answer, please?
A little bit. I have to take it somewhat on notice. We are aware of the incident. The incident occurred on Parks and Wildlife land, so ultimately they're responsible for that area. It's not part of our land.
Thank you, Mr Brennan. Your second question, Councillor Goyne?
I believe the car park is actually maintained by the council, so I'm not entirely sure on that. If that is the case, what capacity do Parks and Wildlife have to implement some sort of, you know what I'm
sanction?
That's the word. Sorry, it's past my bedtime.
I'd have to take it on notice, I'm afraid.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Goyne. Councillor Walker.
So many, but none for tonight.
Councillor Jones.
Thank you. Now that the parklands and Charles Hand Park have been identified as the preferred site for the High Performance Centre by the state, council officers have commenced work to develop an opportunity that sits within the City Heart Plan. So my question is in relation to what is council officers, or how are council officers going about fulfilling the City Heart Plan when the parklands and the Charles Hand Park have been identified for the High Performance Centre?
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Ms Wicks.
Through you, Mayor, I'll take that one on notice.
Thank you, Ms Wicks. Second question, Councillor James.
Yes. The second question is in relation to the Bell Reef ferry service. Is it possible to have an update on the parking arrangements that are in place in relation to all-day parking in the immediate vicinity around the ferry terminal? I mean along Victoria Esplanade and up Queen Street and even along Queen and King. We did have a report from a motion that I put in this place a year or two ago, but I'm seeking an update on parking as to whether or not there needs to be some review of that, and would appreciate some response.
Councillor James, thank you. We will provide an update, a detailed update. as your question deserves a detailed response. But yeah, thank you for your question. Councillor Hume.
Thank you, Mayor. Just one question tonight. The recent federal budget committed further funds to the Mornington Roundabout upgrade project, which is great news for that intersection. And I was just wondering if there's been any discussions taking place or any indication from the state government as to, with that extra funding, when some development of design options or design work will be proceeding.
Councillor Hume, thank you for your question. I can say that I received a call, very excited call from the hardworking Labor member for Franklin, the Honourable Julie Collins MP, to tell me about that amount of money that was made available. As to state government involvement, it's fairly new, of course, this extra funding. The Infrastructure Minister hasn't changed, however. Mr Graham, are you able to provide an update at this stage?
Mr Mayor, we'll inquire with the Department of State Growth on the current status of the project and update Council.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Councillor Hunter.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. I have two questions. At the last meeting, I asked a question in regards to line marking, and I thank the officers for their response to that. However, I was just seeking a bit more detail following up that question as to whether Council has a threshold in which case it'll make an exception to the normal line marking process. For example, if a site has been identified as high risk or hazard, at what point will Council undertake the works itself outside of the normal DSG process?
Thank you. Mr Graham?
I'll take that one on notice.
Thank you, Mr Graham. Your second question?
Thank you. Can officers please consider whether a temporary footpath can be installed between Napier Street and Dumbarton Drive until the remaining land in the area is fully developed?
Mr Graham?
I'll
take that one on notice.
Thank you. All right. Councillor Mulder.
My question is to the Deputy Mayor. Is it a fact that parliamentary process is that the only time that disruption occurs in the Parliament is if there's cross-chamber talk or if the talk between members or staff is of such a volume that it disrupts the proceedings?
Well, as you know, Councillor Mulder, the question's come to me, but I'm happy for the Deputy Mayor to answer that one.
There's a point of order. Question time actually says that a question can be asked of the Mayor or other
but it's still my discretion, Councillor Mulder. I'm very happy.
Oh, yes, it's your discretion, but the question was directed. According to standing order.
Thank you.
You're happy to take the question?
I'm happy to take the question, and I would have, given his time in the same chamber in which I previously served, Councillor Mulder would probably be equally as familiar as I was in my memory now that has to cast me back. But certainly, members were freely able to converse with one another as long as you weren't overtly intruding on the debate. Very common for councillors. Legislative councillors, members, to in fact interject on one another, and always entirely up to the chairperson to determine whether or not to intercede on said objections, interjections and so on and so forth. Certainly things like acknowledging the chair when you pass the centre of the room. There are very different customs, in different places, but yes, Councillor Mulder is certainly correct in his understanding.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Mulder, any other questions? Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
I do just have one thank you, Mr.
Councillor Mulder?
It is not for Councillor Mulder. I was wondering if Council could advise if the practice of excluding representatives' submissions from Council papers is one that is dictated by convention or whether it's a legislative requirement.
I'll call on the CEO, but my understanding is it's a privacy issue. So, CEO.
Yes. We can provide a more detailed response, but essentially it's a privacy issue. I'm not aware of a specific requirement under the legislation, but we have had experience historically where people have been named that they've been contacted outside of council business and in some cases threatened.
Can I supplement?
You can ask a second question.
Yeah.
That might be related to the first one.
Related to the first one, thank you for the answer. I'm still slightly confused. However, if not mandated, from what you're saying, it appears to be privacy legislation upon which you're applying. Mm-hmm. So I'd appreciate it if the provisions that apply through that legislative instrument could be detailed in a response, please. Sure. Yeah.
And my understanding too, CEO, is that if any elected member wishes to look at the representations, they're able to do so.
That's correct, Mayor.
Yeah, thank you. All right, well, we now move on to item number 11, which is closed meeting. I'll call for a motion to move into closed meeting, please. Councillor Goyne, seconded Councillor Hume. Thank you. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Thank you, that's unanimous. Thank you to those members of the public who attended in person this evening, and to those joining us via the live stream at home. We look forward to seeing you here again, same time, same place in 3 weeks' time. Please end the live stream. Thank you.